I was an agent for 26 years, including several years undercover. I have broken into people's houses and installed cameras inside their houses and workplaces. I was getting ready to go out and interview somebody that morning, trying to get a confession on some bank fraud case, and then planes start flying into buildings. And from that day on, switched over and became a terrorism agent on that day. And I'm flying around the world trying to stop the blood money from going to Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups. And my phone rings at my desk. I answer it, FBI, Special Agent Simon here. And it's this voice on the other end of the phone going, "He's here, he's here." And so when they needed somebody for an episode of American Greed or a TV show, I was off on that guy. So help me understand, did you need that money to fund your drug habit, or did the drug...
All of it was for drugs.
Okay.
All of it, I was cash advancing myself to pull out of ATMs and buy Coke.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Gobcast, episode 63. I said it this time, and I remembered. I know I got it wrong last week. Oopsie daisy. Ladies and gents, we're back with a very special episode. We have a very important guest in the studio today, and a guest who is a stark contrast to the average person you might expect sitting across from me on this show. We've talked to all types of convicted felons. We've talked to financial criminals. We've talked to drug traffickers. We've talked to con artists. But today, I've got a former FBI special agent of 26 years sitting across from me, and he hails from Chicago, just like me. Today we're talking to Tom Simon. Welcome on in, man.
Oh, man, it's so nice to be here. Thank you so much, and thanks for including me with such auspicious company.
And you came all the way from Florida.
Yeah, all the way from Florida. Well, this is a big show for me, and it's an opportunity to be on the show is a real honor, so I travel anywhere.
I'm very honored to hear that. You know, I humbly think this is a kind of like a backroom type of show. So I really appreciate your perception.
Man, I mean, you're
it.
killing it. I'm looking at your numbers this weekend before I came out here. You're doing a great job, and more importantly, the content's great. That's good. The followers will come.
Well, I appreciate that a lot. And you as well. I've become recently a pretty big fan of your Instagram posts, kind of debunking a lot of crimes and doing some cool stuff. It's interesting to hear your perspective on that.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm an old guy, right? So it's too old. I'm too old to be like an influencer dancing with my shirt off or anything like that. But for me, when I quit, I'm sure we'll get into my kind of timeline of my career. When I retired from the FBI, I'd opened up a private investigative agency. I was having a really difficult time bringing clients in the doors, right? The investigations are easy. You know how to do that at this point. But getting the clients in the door is the big trick, because no one wants to buy an investigation until they need an investigation. So the only thing you can really do is sort of like being a realtor, is letting people know that you're out there. And so I started the social media thing, because I thought, well, I have this tool of 30 years of stories I could tell. And so I started telling crime stories every day, and it's taken off beyond my wildest dreams. And it allowed me to meet you. And so this is a good
smart
thing.
What you're doing. I mean, I don't think I've seen any other like investigator social media accounts like yours.
Yeah, I try not to make it an infomercial, but I want to just kind of lock into people's minds that this guy seems to know what he's talking about when it comes to financial crimes and federal criminal law.
Yeah. So before, we kind of dive into everything today, I'm very familiar with your story and who you are, not to the extent that I will be by the end of this, but I definitely did my research. Yeah. And the audience probably hasn't done the research that I've done. So for those at home watching that maybe aren't familiar with you or the work you've done, how would you introduce yourself to them?
Well, my name's Tom Simon. As you pointed out at the beginning, I'm a retired FBI special agent, currently working as a licensed private investigator in Florida. However, I work in all 50 states because a lot of what I do is financial crime investigations. And that was true with the FBI, and it's true now in my private investigative practice. And I guess by way of introduction, as a reason to do that, my profile is a little higher than a lot of my former FBI colleagues because I have a social media presence that's taken off pretty nicely for me.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen any other FBI agents or former FBI agents with a following like yours.
There's a couple of them. I mean, usually it's the guys who write the books that do a very nice job of promoting their books online. And so, I'm like I said, I'm just happy anyone's willing to watch me.
You writing a book soon?
Yeah, I mean, I like to. I don't have any. Listen, I'm a huge reader, right? I'm reading 100 books a year since I was a kid, and the idea of writing a book is really attractive to me. I have some cool ideas for it.
Cool, yeah.
Yeah, but the problem is I'm still a full-time private investigator right now, having to make a living, and I don't think anyone's going to give me a lot of money on the front end to write a book, because that's not how publishing works anymore. So I would need. So my thought is, I'm in my 50s now. I'm going to investigate, make some money doing that in my 50s, see if I can do some public speaking or maybe some TV appearances and stuff, and then when I'm 60, maybe I'll settle down then.
Then it's book time.
Write the books.
Nice. I like that. So kind of before you became an agent and everything, I'm curious, like, what was your childhood like?
I had a really normal kind of suburban Chicago childhood. And, was a Catholic kid, went to Catholic school, played all the sports, not really good at any of them. You know, I was on the football team, the basketball team, and all that. You know,
do you think
mostly
Catholic
riding the
school
bench.
like kept you on the straight and narrow?
I think, theology aside, I think that discipline was good for me.
For sure.
And I think it's good for a lot of kids who have an independent spirit like I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so I needed that structure. And so, yeah, I mean, it was good. It probably cost my parents a lot of money. I mean, we were also, you came from a good suburb of Chicago. I came from a good suburb of Chicago. We had outstanding public schools there, but my dad's Catholic, his dad's Catholic, and so my family's been raised and educated by nuns since like back to the Stone Ages. So the idea of anyone breaking that chain, it wasn't going to be me.
Yeah, I was just curious because my cousin, when I had younger, had gone to Catholic school, and I went to public school, and he was a very good kid, and I was a pretty big delinquent. So,
do you think that was do you think public school dragged you down that road of
no,
of
for
kind of
sure.
drugs and partying,
I think it was just kind of how I was when I was younger. I just didn't like school.
Yeah, neither did I, but I think we had very different reactions to that.
For sure. Yeah, you were still a good student and got it done, though.
I wasn't a great student in elementary and high school. I was, a C plus B minus student. And I went to Clemson University in South Carolina, which wasn't all that difficult to get into back then.
It's pretty good by my standards.
It's a fine school. I mean, no problem there. But it's not like, we're not splitting atoms at Clemson back in 1988.
Mm-hmm.
And but then I understood that college matters. College is when when the world starts actually paying attention to you because you want to get that good first job, which will lead to other first jobs and kind of a happy life. So I really put my nose to the grindstone and learned how to study and for the first time in my life in college.
Yeah, a lot of people, specifically a lot of young people out there think high school is it. They're like, oh, I got bad grades in high school. It's over with.
No, there's a college for everyone, and no one cares where you go to college unless you're going to like Harvard.
Yeah.
So
I'm guessing that when you were younger, you obviously didn't always, from day one, want to be an FBI agent.
Well, pretty early, Nick.
Really?
Yeah. So I think my first thoughts of being an FBI agent were probably around age 14, 15.
Damn, okay.
And so by that point, we had left suburban Chicago for the 80s. My old man got a job in D.C., so we moved to D.C., and so, and my mom was selling houses, and so she sold a couple houses to some FBI agents, and she said, hey, you know what? My son was kind of thinking about the FBI as a career, and they're like, you should do it. It was great. And like, would you take 10 minutes to just talk to him? So she dragged me in to go talk to these guys, and I would talk to them, and I asked them, I go, what should I major in if I want to be an FBI agent? They said, well, major in law or accounting.
Interesting.
And I go, well, what did that entail? And he goes, well, accounting's a 4-year degree. In law school, you got to get a 4-year degree and then go to law school, which is an additional 3 years. And I was like you, I hated school. And so the idea of staying in school for one extra day was just too horrible to contemplate.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Yeah. But the reason I think I was interested in the FBI to begin with was for all the wrong reasons. I was watching action movies and reading comic books and reading action like paperback novels and stuff like that. I thought I would be spending 30 years jumping up and moving trains and punching bad guys'
like Mission
lights
Impossible.
out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Jumping out of helicopters on top of bad guys and putting the handcuffs
hanging
on
off plane wings.
All that, yeah. And we'll get into it, but the job was super satisfying, but for very different, more cerebral reasons.
Damn, I mean, it sounds like you were kind of destined to be an FBI agent.
I don't know that I was destined to do so, but it was something. But what they were asking, the decisions I made from age 14 to age 25 were all geared toward the goal of being an FBI agent. And I think it's not a bad thing to give a young person a goal. And especially if it's a goal that if I fail that, I've probably set myself up for some decent, employment and a life thereafter. And so, so I made the decision not to use drugs. I made the decision to not that the FBI really cares if you're drinking, but I know that a lot of bad decisions arise from drinking. So I made the decision not to drink, right? Yep. And so, which I also what comes with that is there's some sacrifice, right? You're not going to be the fun guy at the party. Maybe you're not going to get invited when all your friends are getting together to play quarters. I'm dating myself, but or whatever, the beer pong today, I guess they would say. And so there's some sacrifice there, and and the decision to major in accounting, something I had no interest in, right? And the decision to study and get good grades as opposed to just kind of like loafing around and enjoying college like everyone else was. And so there were just decisions that got made geared toward the goal of becoming an FBI agent. And then it happened at age 25.
So I mean, it's really interesting to me that you mentioned law and accounting as the two big like FBI degrees.
That was back in like the 80s and 90s, right? It's changed quite a bit. But continue with your
I think
question.
the average person would guess criminal justice naturally, right?
Yeah, criminal justice is not a good degree. Criminal justice and criminology they're objectively bad degrees.
Okay.
But more importantly, and we can argue about that. My followers, when I say mean things about those majors, jump me in on Instagram.
The holders of those degrees jump.
Yeah, they sure do, and I get that. But my goal is not to denigrate people who have those degrees. My goal is to talk to the 17-year-old kid who may be watching this show or watching my feed, who wants to be an FBI agent, who wants to set themselves on the right path. And criminology and criminal justice do not. The FBI really doesn't. They care very deeply what you major in. But they're using that as a proxy for your intelligence and your problem-solving ability. Right? It has nothing to do with what your assignment will be once you become an FBI agent. So criminology and criminal justice are two of the easiest degrees you can get in college. Maybe the easiest degrees.
Interesting.
And so it doesn't really, so while there may be geniuses with those degrees who are studying that, they're not setting themselves apart from all the dum-dums who are also studying that because it's an easy degree. Those degrees arose, Nick, back in the days where they'd have a police department like the NYPD and everyone just had high school diplomas. But if you wanted to become a lieutenant or a sergeant, you had to have a college degree. So these guys would go get criminal justice degrees at night because it was an easy degree and it didn't require them to hit the books. Right? So that's what those degrees exist for. But colleges are money machines. And so what's happening now is colleges are offering criminology and criminal justice degrees to young people and lying to them, telling them they'll be qualified to be FBI agents if they go down that path. And it's just not true.
That's fascinating. I mean, just from someone who didn't even go to college, I would immediately assume criminal justice. But it's interesting that it's an outdated degree.
I think it's not so much outdated. It was never indated. The FBI and every law enforcement agency wants you to come to the table with problem-solving skills and maybe some technical skills. You know, something that maybe you know something about chemistry or biology or computer science or engineering or accounting or finance. And then they're going to send you to an academy. The academy is going to be where you learn to become an FBI agent or a cop. The idea that you're going to learn that from age 18 to 22 in a classroom at University of Virginia is just goofy. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not feasible.
Right, exactly.
So what are some of the – it sounds like the FBI looks more for specific traits in people or things that stand out from the rest of the group.
Yeah.
What are some things that the FBI looks for in a recruit?
Okay, so right away they're looking for the FBI has core competencies, they call it. It'd be like being organized, being able to plan, being able to prioritize, being able to juggle multiple projects at once, being able to behave ethically, if you have that ethical decision, if you can steal that $50 sitting there in someone's drawer during a search warrant and no one would know, do you do it or do you not do it because it's the wrong thing to do, right? We're trying to drive at those type of people who we don't need to police 24/7 and look over their shoulder because they're just not the type of people who are going to do unethical things.
Yeah, they have that agency.
And the other thing, it would be dealing well with others. I mean, in any law enforcement job, and I think this is where police often fail in America, the interpersonal skills, the idea that building a rapport with someone and showing some empathy for them and having a back and forth and active empathetic listening is going to get information from people much more so than kind of being a hard-ass cop. And so the people who've kind of mastered those skills of interpersonal relationships are very attractive to the FBI.
So when the FBI is finding these people that have these traits that they like, how are they going about it? Are they more so scouting people out? Do people apply to the FBI and then? Yeah,
that's one of those myths that I like to debunk about the FBI is that people are recruited. Like you wake up one morning and there's like two guys in suits standing.
That's how I imagine it.
Standing at the foot of your bed saying, "Nick, we need you. Get out of bed. We're taking you to the academy." No, it's like any government job. You go to FBIjobs.gov and you apply. But,
interesting.
But the FBI had once, and they get hundreds of thousands of applications a year, some of which are serious, some of which are goofballs. And the first blush they're doing is to take a look and seeing, is this person educated? Does this person have a competitive four-year degree in something substantial? And we could talk about what that is if you wish. And do they have relevant work experience? No one's going into the FBI as an agent right out of college. It's a second career for everybody. The average starting age of an FBI agent is 30. And nearly every FBI agent is taking a cut in pay when they go to work for the FBI.
Interesting. But every FBI agent at the end of the day knows that's the most stable job they're probably ever going to.
Well, yeah, I mean, you hope the company's not going out of business, right? And it's a job, and it's one of the few jobs out there that still has a pension. So but no one I think is joining the FBI to get rich. If you are, you've really got your head on screwy.
Yeah, there's for sure a patriotic element to joining the FBI. It's like, hey, I want to help my country out. I think
there's that. I mean, you want to keep Americans safe, but beyond just sort of the emotion of it, just a moral compass, right? The idea of right and wrong, the idea that maybe we're going to stand up to bullies and the people who are going to pick on the weak and helpless, we're going to be there for them.
Karma's real.
Yeah. Well, it's making sure that if the universe doesn't drop some karma on them, maybe the U.S. Department of Justice can.
Nice. I like that. I like that a lot. So, getting out of college, I mean, obviously you didn't immediately join the FBI. No. What'd your work experience look like?
Yeah, so I graduated with an accounting degree, and then I passed this certification test that accountants pass to make themselves certified public accountants. And I got a job with a big accounting firm, one of the biggest. Actually, at the time, it was the biggest accounting firm in the world. It was called KPMG.
Nice.
And so I went to work for them. They said pick a city. And at that point, I had moved away from Chicago when I was 11, and then spent my teen years in D.C. and then college in South Carolina. I thought, what sounds good? Chicago sounds good.
Yep,
and so
best
I had
city in the world.
Had them send me back to Chicago. I was working right there at Wacker and Michigan Avenue.
Nice.
With the big accounting firm, and it was great. I really liked it a lot. Some of the best friends I met in my life, I met at that accounting firm. And then 3 years later, the FBI opened their doors, and it was time for me to apply.
So you did a few years of that company, but even as you're working there, the whole time you're knowing, like, I'm going to the FBI.
Oh, and everybody knew too, right? See, I got an internship with the FBI when I was in college, so I sort of got like brainwashed and indoctrinated with the FBI for like this 8-week period in college.
What did you do with the internship?
It's funny. I thought, all right, I'm going to be an FBI intern. They're going to have me like chasing bad guys, going undercover.
Got your service weapon,
right,
your badge.
Exactly.
Yep.
But because I was an accounting major, I was placed in the accounting unit at headquarters, and so it was mind-numbingly dull. But one thing they tried to do was make sure the interns had an opportunity to kind of sit with agents, kind of shadow an agent for a day, and do sort of field trips from your actual day-to-day internship job. And the biggest thing that the FBI uses the internship for, as far as I was concerned, was they have now, there were 50 interns when I did it, 50 people that they know can pass the background check. Because you walk into the internship with a top secret security clearance, and then you're going to go work somewhere, and then they really want you to come back and apply to the FBI. So a handful of us did from the internship.
It's really interesting hearing you describe this early process of becoming an FBI agent, because I have a good friend of mine who I grew up with who I am insistent is an FBI agent, and he won't quite tell me, but I know what he does, and I know everything you're saying is lining up.
This is fascinating to me because I've heard people tell me stuff like, what is it about this guy that
is
a dead giveaway?
I'll tell you a few things. So
and I'll tell you if it's horse shit or not.
He does like IT, he does like security stuff, computer wise.
All right.
He's pretty good at what he does. Like ever since we were young, he was always like that guy for that kind of thing.
So he's like a cybersecurity type?
Yes, yes. And I've known him since I was like 12, and he was doing that stuff with the computers.
Okay.
And at one point, he had an internship for some, I don't know what the company was, but he had an internship, and he mentioned to me, this was a few years ago at this point, he was like, I might have to get like a security clearance at some point for this. And then he never brought it up again. And every time I've asked him,
geographically, where is he?
He's in Virginia.
Okay.
So he works a lot in D.C. though. He tells me.
Yeah.
So he mentioned to me a couple years ago that he was potentially going to get that clearance, and now whenever I ask about it, he's like, "Oh no, like I'm just working at the company, doing software stuff."
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I can't. Here's what I'll tell you: most people who work for the FBI are more than welcome to share that with their friends and family members, right? There's no there's no need to be cagey about that. Right?
So you're not living like a double life.
Well, I mean, again, some people go undercover. I was undercover for 2 full years living as someone else. So in that sense, you're truly living a double life. But your normal agent working cases or cybersecurity specialist who's not an agent out there doing undercover work or anything like that, who's working in the office doing very important work, there's no reason for them to bullshit their friends and family about what they do unless that just gives them a sense of importance somehow. So, I mean, I was an agent for 26 years, including several years undercover. My friends, family, and neighbors all knew what I did for a living. There was no reason to keep it under my hat. Why begin your relationship with people living a lie? Now, the asshole who's sitting next to me on an airplane when I'm flying from Florida to California, who says, "So what do you do for a living?" Does he get to know? No.
Doesn't need to know.
I can tell him I'm an accountant. Nobody wants to talk to me at that point.
What's funny is that is similar to the lie that I tell people when I'm tired and don't feel like talking. That's what I do. I'm like, accountant usually is what I throw out.
That shuts them down immediately. the Ambien they took when they got on the plane
immediately hits.
Yeah.
So before you had actually started doing work with the FBI full time, while you're at that accounting firm that you had mentioned, are you doing similar work to what you're doing at the FBI?
Yeah. So what happened was this. So I was doing audit work, just normal, with mostly investment companies, making sure that the earnings that they were reporting were true and accurate. And that's the easiest way to talk about that. And then, right about a year and a half into it, they brought in a retired federal agent, and he was going to start the KPMG, the name of the company, the Forensic and Investigative Services practice there, basically conducting white-collar crime investigations for clients of the accounting firm. And so like his first day there, I'm at his office, at his doors, introduce myself, say, listen, I want to be a FBI agent as my next job. But there's no guarantee that that'll happen. And I was an FBI intern, and I have kind of an investigative mind. Would you be willing to kind of take me on as your staff person in this practice that you're starting? And he said, yeah, as soon as we get a client. And so, but eventually clients started coming in the door, and he started dragging me over from the audit practice into the investigative practice. And I got to tell you, it was a great experience. I was out there conducting investigations as a 23, 24-year-old kid, knocking on doors. No one gets arrested. But it's very similar to what I do now as a private investigator. I mean, that was investigating financial crimes at age 23 and a half for,
That's really interesting,
the biggest accounting firm in the world.
I was picturing you pre-FBI, just holed up in an office, sitting there like, let me out, like, let me in the FBI.
I mean, that clearly was happening also.
For sure, yeah.
But it gave me a nice safety net because, again, even in the best case scenario, a lot of things need to break your way for the FBI application process to work out for you. There has to be congressional funding. You have to be exactly what the FBI is looking for. You have to perform really well at that interview, stuff like that. And so there's a lot of really good candidates who just don't get the job for a variety of reasons. Having that job as a private fraud investigator at that young age gave me a sense of comfort that if for some reason the FBI shouldn't work out, all is not lost. Yep. And I could have a fantastic career doing what I knew I wanted to do, and that's conduct investigations.
Yep. So what does the FBI interview process even look like?
Yeah. It takes about a year, and it's long and frustrating and horrible and abusive and but not in the ways you'd think. So it starts out with just an intelligence test. So they bring you in, you take an intelligence test. About half the people pass, half the people fail, and then they have a meet and greet where they review your resume and make sure your degree is something that they consider competitive, making sure your work experience is something they consider competitive, and a one-on-one person. Sorry, hitting your microphone.
Oh, you're good.
And then a one-on-one meeting with the guy who's your meet and greet evaluator, which I used to do, an FBI agent, talks to you, kind of gains an understanding, gets a feel for you, and then either gives you a yes or no about whether you go to the next stage of the process. And the next stage of the process is a physical fitness test. They bring you to like a high school at 6 in the morning with like a dozen other applicants, and they want to see you do let me think this through. How many sit-ups can you do in 1 minute? How many unbroken push-ups can you do?
Oh, I'm fucked.
How fast can you run 400 meters, I think it is.
Okay.
And then, 400. And then how fast can you run a mile and a half? The trick, though, is that these things are all back to back to back. There's not like a sizable rest time between them.
So it's really sounding like just endurance tests.
Yeah. Strength and endurance, right? Yep. I mean, push-ups are arguably
for sure,
strength. Yeah. And so, it used to be, now like 90% of the people are failing.
Oh, wow.
When I went through, everybody was, which doesn't make sense to me. I get that people aren't in great shape or people are very busy and don't have time to work out or there's, I'm sympathetic to all that. What I don't get is why you would show up for a physical fitness test that you're going to fail.
Yeah.
And so that's weird to me that like I made goddamn sure before I went to that test that I was giving myself that test because it's not a pop quiz, like several times a week in the month leading up to me going into it. But that's the next thing. So if you pass the physical fitness screening, the next thing you do is you go to what they call the Phase 2 interview. It's a panel interview that lasts for 1 hour with 3 agents kind of firing about 13 questions at you for you to answer. And then you leave the room and they grade you, and you find out if you passed or failed. You also take a written test to make sure that you can write in complete, beautiful, well-written English. Mm-hmm. You pass that, next thing you have is a polygraph test.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, so they give you a lie detector test, and they're really focused on are you in compliance with the FBI's drug history policy? Did you tell the truth on your application? And are you a spy and are you a terrorist, right? And so they're not looking to find out if you stole a candy bar in second grade or anything like that, but the big stuff.
What is the drug history policy?
Okay, yeah, I can talk to you about that because I know that your
that really piques
viewers
my
are
interest.
Okay, so
Yep.
let me tell you what it was and what an impossible situation it was.
Oh boy.
Okay, so it used to be that you could not have used marijuana in the past year or any more than like 10 times in your life or something like that. Or maybe it was 20 times in your life. It was some relatively high number. And so what happens is, and you may have heard of this, people who use drugs aren't necessarily logging it in about how many times they've used it. And so we would get these applicants, and perfectly reasonable applicants, who were like, yeah, I smoked weed in college, and was it more or less than 10 times? They're like, I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, there was quite a few parties, but not every party I was smoking. I mean, sometimes I just passed it on. And so what was happening was just making liars out of our applicants.
Yeah.
And so then the FBI got more reasonable, I would argue, and said, listen, just not within the past year, right? And again, we still run into this problem that marijuana is technically a Schedule I narcotic in the federal system of criminal justice, right? I don't think that's right. I think they should change it. I think they should fall in line with the states and and let the chips fall where they may, but I don't get to make those rules.
Yeah.
And so the FBI landed on, and so, it's legal in Colorado, it's illegal in Louisiana. And so it's just a messy situation we have. And so the FBI just said, just not within the past year, right? And then, and not having used any other drug other than marijuana in the past 10 years. So that one's a little more serious, and never, ever having sold it even for reimbursement. That's the current FBI drug policy.
Okay. That's actually a lot more fair than I thought it was.
It allows for the fact that sometime when people are young, they're experimenting with stuff, they're into things that maybe they grow out of over time. And, if there's a decent period of sobriety in there, and then people deserve a chance.
Yeah.
And we would be running off a lot of otherwise qualified candidates for being just stick in the mud saying no one can ever have been young.
Yeah, just making mistakes,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
How frequently would you say people are lying about their drug use on these applications?
About 50% of the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because what happens is when you're polygraphed, you're asked about it.
Yep.
And if somehow you beat that, you know what's going to happen? There's going to be a background check later in the process where all your stoner friends are going to tell on you. And so it's not worth your time to try to beat the system by lying to the FBI in a polygraph and on written applications. There's just no upside to that because you may be disqualifying yourself from other jobs in the government that require a top secret security clearance. Now you're on record as a liar. It's just best to tell the truth.
That's really bad.
Best to tell the truth or just wait out the amount of time you need to wait out before you apply. It's, again, there's tons and tons of FBI agents who have a history with marijuana and they're fine agents.
Yeah, and nowadays that's probably just going to become more and more common.
I'm just hoping at some point the federal government and the states just kind of all fall in line and we're working under one legal rubric. It makes no sense to me that this guy's going to get locked up in Louisiana, but this guy can smoke till his heart's content in Florida as long as his doctor says it's okay. Then you go to California and it's like they got gumball machines. I'm willing to have a conversation with anybody about what the law should be, but let's make it uniform. Why are we creating criminals out of some people just because of what zip code they live in?
Yeah, there needs to be some sort of clear federal guidance on where weed should be.
And then you run into these awful situations, from what I understand, of these the weed shops not being able to deposit their money in many of the federally insured financial institutions because it's a Schedule I narcotic and the bank doesn't want to get accused of money laundering. We've created an impossible situation for everybody involved.
It's a nightmare. And are you familiar with the THCA and the whole hemp industry?
This is not my world, but tell me.
I'll fill you in on like a base level. Yeah. So the 2018 Farm Bill defined cannabis as having over 0.3% Delta-9 THC by dry weight. Okay. Delta-9 THC is the form of THC that's found in weed after it's oxidized, right? So when you harvest off a plant, you can still smoke that shortly after, but it's not defined as cannabis because the THC hasn't oxidized yet. Instead, when you harvest, shortly after harvest, you have something that's called THCA, right? When you apply heat to it, when you smoke it, it oxidizes and converts it to Delta-9 and gets you stoned. But because of the 2018 Farm Bill, the THCA is legal to ship across the entire country. And because of there was a Supreme Court ruling, I don't remember what year, the agriculture ruling of whatever year it was fairly recently, federal law on that supersedes all the states banning it. So as long as your flower has less than the 0.3% THC by dry weight, you can ship it. There's a lot of dispensaries here in California that are blocks away from here. We could go buy a bag of weed right now, and by the federal definition, it is hemp, not weed, and we can ship it today.
Huh.
It's insane.
It's an impossible situation for everybody to navigate.
Yeah.
And so, but we can't get the Congress to agree on anything. I can't imagine that this is what's going to unify everybody.
It's not changing anytime soon.
Yeah, interesting.
So something you had said earlier that really caught my attention was you talked about how during the FBI background check, your friends are going to snitch on you. And when I think of a background check, I just think of like, you looked at my court records.
Yeah.
How deep is an FBI background check?
It's like a proctology exam. I'm not going to lie.
Really?
It's real. Because we're giving you a top secret security clearance at the end of this thing. So it's really important that we get it right as an agency, so we don't bring people in who are spies or terrorists and stuff like that. So they're looking at your criminal history. They're looking at your credit score. They're looking they're looking at all the places in the U.S. you've lived and every job you've had, and then they're dispatching FBI agents and FBI investigators all over the country to go knock on the doors of those people who you worked with and your former employers, and to ask them, was he a good employee? Did he seem to be financially responsible? Any indication of a drug problem, alcohol problem? Was he honest? Would you trust him with national security secrets if you were in a position to make that decision? Things like that. And then from that, all these little tiny reports get compiled into a big report that FBI headquarters takes a look at to kind of give the thumbs up or thumbs down to this person. Are they a national security risk? Are they? Is this a person who's going to be a problem employee because they've been a problem employee in their last 10 jobs? Or is this person going to be easy to work with and honest?
When you go and let's say you guys are meeting the applicant's friends and family, are you also potentially judging the applicant based on the people they surround themselves with, or is it more about just the applicant's character?
No, it's really focused on the applicant, right? So, a lot of the leads that we're running down, the applicant is providing for us, but we're also doing the neighborhood canvases and stuff like that.
Yep.
But no, if someone's I've talked to people. In fact, I've done background checks where you got to talk to the ex-wife. Right, and she always has horrible things to say about the husband.
Yep, that's not going to be good.
But it doesn't necessarily eliminate him because there's some context there. And this is clearly an ex-wife. She has an axe to grind, and maybe he wasn't the most attentive husband, and maybe she has mean things to say about his personality. But are any of those things stuff that's going to bleed over to the job? Probably not. And so, if we were doing a background check on you and some of your friends looked like unsavory characters,
I'm in trouble. I
don't think that's a problem. Again, we want to know what they have to say about you, and we're not here to judge who they are as people.
Well, I think the credit score step would stop me. I don't think you'd get to, my credits. Dude, I'm like 2 years deep in credit repair, and I'm 534 today.
Okay.
I checked this morning.
Oh, nowhere to go but up.
I can't get a pencil, dude. They won't let me shit, dude. I've made some bad decisions with credit cards.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that sometime because it seems so avoidable.
Well, the brief summary of it, when I was 18 and I was just a complete fiend for any drug I could get my hands on. I just liked getting high. And my mom, prior to me turning 18, had put me as like an authorized user on a couple of her cards. So I had like a bit of pre-established history. I turn 18, I have a coke addiction, and my credit score is 740.
Yeah.
So I immediately, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Capital One was the third one, and I got a collective like $15,000 in credit.
Help me understand. Did you need that money to fund your drug habit, or did the drugs?
All of it was for drugs.
Okay, got it. So it wasn't like the drugs made you fast and free with money, and you were just buying stuff left and right for fun
all
because
of
you weren't
it.
making good decisions.
All of it, I was cash advancing myself to pull out of ATMs and buy coke.
Right.
So
with nothing to show for it at the
nothing
end.
to show for it except a horrible debt. So I did that, and my credit is still 534 to this day. But at that time...
Did you ever have to declare bankruptcy?
No.
Have you been chipping away at that debt? Or are they just all with collection agencies?
So there was a few years where like I was genuinely just not able to pay it at all. I was like dirt broke. So I was like, well, I'm just going to turn my phone off and ignore this. Yeah. And one of them tried to sue me. The other two never did. Nobody could find me. Because I was living in like this shithole house in like southern Illinois, away from my home, because I got kicked out of the house by my parents.
Yeah.
It was like rock bottom of my life, you know. And one of them tried to sue me. None of them could find me. Just now, lately, I'm at the point where I'm like starting to be like, okay, I want to take care of these, but they're right on the mark where they're about to fall off my credit.
Okay.
I'm like less than a year away on a couple of these debts.
So you had not paid the debt. It had gone to a collection agency. You ignored that, and eventually they just kind of go away and disappear?
Yes.
Interesting.
That's basically the tactic I took. I'm 26 now, so like these debts are starting to hit the 7 and 8 year mark where they're falling off my credit. But now I just have to I still have the little things from that era. Like I didn't pay the internet bill and they sent me to collections. I didn't pay the garbage bill. I have the garbage company, Waste Management, is after me for like $140.
I know that it supplied you like amazing stories, but if you had a time machine and could go back and do it all differently, would you make different decisions?
I don't think I'd change a single thing, honestly.
Really?
You know, I think I was definitely an idiot when I was younger, but I think I learned so much from it that like if I didn't have those lessons, I might still be an idiot.
I appreciate your honesty there.
So yeah, for sure. You know, I think my IQ is elevated since I was younger. You know,
Well,
so
it happens.
yeah, I don't think I would go back and change anything.
Okay, well, good.
You know,
well, that means it's a well-lived life, I guess.
That's right. That's right. You know, and it got me here.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Look
it
at
worked out in the end. So the FBI, you know, they're digging into your background. They're showing up at your friends and family's houses. It's just the people that you give them as references, though? Or are
well,
they
no. Okay, so I mean, you're going to supply them with some leads to start out with, and then the agents who are conducting the background investigations need to develop their own leads, they call that.
Okay.
And so they're going to be talking to neighbors all the time, and they're going to be talking to, you're going to tell them where you worked in the past, and then they're going to go there and find out, is your supervisor still working there? If the answer is no, then human resources will generally serve up people who worked with you in kind of proximity who could speak about your character. And so you're developing your own leads, you know, and you're always asking people, is there someone else I should talk to who you think might know Nick really well, who could tell me a little bit more about what he was like back then, that type of thing. It's thorough. I mean, again, it's also one of those things where it's most people freak out about it, but most people are fine. By the time you get to that stage of the process, you pass the polygraph and all that, very rarely is the background check going to eliminate somebody from consideration.
What was like the worst background check you've seen? Have you ever seen someone just get just a horrible performance on that? They're a terrible neighbor?
I'm trying to think. None that I conducted. I kind of avoided doing those because between you and I found it kind of boring. And so I wanted to, I mean, I didn't really go into the FBI to kind of screen candidates for
sure.
jobs. I wanted to catch bad guys and put them in prison. So in my life, I've probably only done 5 or 6 full background checks that were mine. And most of those were presidential appointees. Only a couple of them were agent candidates because people, you know, if you're nominated to be on some, Secretary of Education or Assistant Secretary of the Treasury or something like that, you have to get a background check, and it's the same background check, but you're not necessarily coming out of it with a top secret security clearance. The client for the FBI is the White House in that situation, and they're making a decision about whether they truly want to hire this person. Because
interesting.
Well, they don't want to name somebody secretary of whatever and then find them in bed with a live boy or a dead girl a week later. So they use us to kind of screen the candidates. And I had some presidential appointee applicants who had some bad history. I mean, nothing that like shocks the conscience, like mostly drugs, honestly.
Okay.
And stuff like that. And so you submit that information to the White House, and either the White House gives a shit or they don't. I have no dog in that fight.
Interesting. So after you pass this process, your background obviously comes out good. You're waving at the neighbors and everything.
Yeah.
What's the next step?
So you do that. Once you pass the background check, it's, in my opinion, once you pass the interview, it's yours to lose, right? Because you know if you're a spy, a drug user, a terrorist. For the polygraph,
should have shown up knowing you're going to pass all that.
Yeah. And there's a medical screening to make sure you're not going to have like a grabber as soon as you have to run around a track. I think before they send you to the academy, there's another physical fitness test. But the real next step, the big next step, is they send you to the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. It's a 20-week program where you're living there in the dorms, learning how to become an FBI agent.
That's a long time.
20 weeks. Yeah. And for a lot of these guys who are like 36, 37 years old, they haven't had a roommate in a bunk bed in many, many years.
Yeah. That's a college thing right there.
It felt like it.
So what's the boot camp like? What are you doing there?
It's a mixture between law school and boot camp, right? And so you're learning investigative skills, you're learning how to shoot, you're learning how to fight, a lot of physical fitness, you're learning constitutional law, interview and interrogation, and being evaluated along the way. For me, I was never in the military or police officer, so learning how to shoot was kind of eye-opening. I hadn't really handled a gun much, and so that was kind of the challenge for me. But other people who were former military or former cops, maybe the academic stuff in classroom was more difficult for them, or maybe the guys who were older who hadn't been kept in the best shape, the physical fitness stuff is just really bringing them to the edge of death. So everyone has their challenges while you're there. But at the end of the day, you're learning cool stuff. You'll like this. On campus at the FBI Academy, there's a town. It's a little city. It's called Hogan's Alley.
Okay.
And there's a motel, there's a Subway sandwich shop, there's a bank, there's a movie theater, there's a trailer park, there's nice townhouses. It's a nice little town. It's occupied by no one other than paid actors. And here's what they have. This town, the bank gets robbed every day, right? There's all sorts of stuff going on in the pharmacy involving prescription drug frauds and stuff. And the students at the FBI Academy go to Hogan's Alley for their practical applications to conduct investigations. But everyone that they're interviewing and arresting and conducting search warrants at their house are paid actors.
Really?
It's amazing.
And they're there, do they just have certain hours the day they show up? Or
Yeah,
are they there for...
I imagine they're just locals who live like in Stafford, Virginia or whatever,
That's
and go home at night. Their full-time
actually.
job is being a role player in Hogan's Alley. Yeah, so I mean, the idea is that by the time I get to Chicago as a first office agent in 1995 and begin getting assigned my first cases, I've already worked dozens of investigations that are fake at Hogan's Alley. Where you've actually had to wrestle a guy to the ground and put the handcuffs on him and stuff, or or you're interviewing like a prostitute in a motel room at the motel in Hogan's Alley.
They really had it all in Hogan's Alley.
Or, like I said, the bank gets robbed every day.
So when they get in the room with the prostitute in the motel, since it's Hogan's Alley, they're just like sitting in there and waiting for you? They're just like, all right, well, like, we can't actually do any prostitution. Let's just wait.
Well, the idea, I had this exercise. It was kind of interesting. She was a witness to something, right? So the idea is that you're going to go to this hotel, you're going to knock on the door. They kind of give you the setup ahead of time. Then they send you in, and they're cameras, they're evaluating you. And you walk in, and there's like a beautiful, scantily clad woman sitting on the bed that you need to interview. And you're interviewing her, and she's acting flirtatious. She's kind of coming on to you a little bit.
She's trying to tempt you.
Well, why? And again, they're trying to test your professionalism. What would you do if a woman you were interviewing started getting super flirty with you? Stuff like that. So they make it really interesting by throwing you these little curveballs that are sort of ripped from the headlines to make sure you're not going to just totally flounder if anything goes off script in the field.
This is really fascinating to hear about because in a lot of ways it kind of is what I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, again, the FBI has the benefit over a lot of police departments of just having a massive budget. And so, J. Edgar Hoover, the founder of the FBI, he was a bad guy in many ways, but one thing he did do right was professionalize law enforcement in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, pre-FBI, I can't imagine how like easy crime was to get away with.
Well, there's that, but cops were also very corrupt before the FBI. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at the cops in like the 1800s and 1900s, and they were, it was almost stereotypical, the idea that you would bribe a cop for this or that.
So if there's a corruption in the FBI, who oversees that?
Okay, so we've had it. We had an agent named Robert Hansen.
I've read a lot at him.
Yeah,
He was trading secrets.
Yeah, he was stealing secrets from top secret stuff and selling it to the Russians as an active FBI agent at the same time that I was working. And so, but if it's day-to-day corrupt, if there was an agent who took a bribe or an agent who did something inappropriate or assaulted a woman or something off the charts, the FBI has an internal affairs division called the Office of Professional Responsibility, and they're absolutely brutal and terrifying, and they rip agents to shreds. And I was very, very happy to, one, not ever work for them, and two, never ever to be in their crosshairs.
Yeah, that sounds like a spooky office to be in.
Well, I mean, it's important, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not saying they shouldn't exist. I'm saying, agents need to have, all law enforcement officers need to make sure that they're being looked after by some higher authority that's going to make sure they don't do something unethical.
For sure.
And so I appreciated what they did. Like I said, I was just happy to never get crossways with them.
Yeah, you stayed long away from that.
Yeah.
So kind of taking it back to your early days, once you had finished the academy in Virginia, did you choose Chicago or did
Yeah, see, the way it works, Nick, is funny. It's your second day at the academy, the second day of 20 weeks. You have to give them a list from 1 to 55. There's 55 field offices in the FBI. It's basically the big 55 cities in the U.S. And you need to rank them from 1 to 55, from where you'd most like to go to where you'd least like to go. And you find yourself doing that, and a lot of guys having conversations with their husbands and wives and stuff like that. The top 10's pretty easy. Bottom 10 is pretty easy. It's that middle 36, or at the time 37. Now it's that was the real pain in the ass. And so you do that, and then in your 4th week at the academy, they get your whole class together. It's like the Oscars. They hand you, everyone goes to the front of the class one at a time, alphabetical order. They hand you an envelope. You open it, you look at it, you go, and they look into a camera that they always film it because it's kind of funny. And they go, I'm going to Anchorage, Alaska. And then the next guy gets up there, opens his envelope, and goes, I'm going to Lubbock, Texas. And so it's always sort of interesting. I got sent to Chicago.
Do they put together like a little collage of all you guys saying it into the camera or something?
Yeah, it's available.
That's just internally, I'd imagine.
Well, no, they also say, they make you say what your first choice was and then what you got. Like, my name's John. I'm hoping to go to Lexington, Kentucky. Then he opens it. I'm going to Los Angeles. And so it's just this,
and you can usually tell pretty quick whether or not they're happy
about that. It's this constant stream of disappointments.
So typically, how far down the list should you expect to actually get sent to?
I've known people who've gotten their 56th choice.
Really?
Yeah. But here's the thing. And the dirty secret is that they want to know what you want, and they're not looking to disappoint you. But the real thing, the biggest factor involved in what office you get as a first agent, rather your first office as a new agent, is the needs of the FBI, right? And that's really just a head count thing. Let's say Los Angeles Division has 500 agents. But let's say right now they're supposed to have 500 agents. But let's say they have 470 because people retire, people transfer, people get promotions to headquarters. They're down 30 agents. That's a lot to be down. And so maybe this next couple classes of new agents is going to be the easiest way to fill those empty slots. So people contact me all the time, say, hey, I'm getting ready to go to the academy. What do you think my chances are of getting Milwaukee? And I would say it really depends on who has left Milwaukee in the 45 days before you got to the academy to create a void that you can fill. So it's really hard to game the system and try to figure out where you're going to be.
How high up was Chicago on your list?
Chicago was my number 1 choice.
Oh, wow.
Chicago had a giant deficit of agents for that very reason, ton of retirements. The FBI was also coming off of a hiring freeze at the time, so they hadn't hired any agents in 3 years.
What was the freeze for?
Congress hadn't given them money. It's always it's always some battle between the FBI, the president, and Congress. Whatever. I got no dog in that fight.
Yeah.
And so I knew for a fact that Chicago was way understaffed. And even though I was applying from Chicago, I put Chicago number 1 and I got it. That has changed. Now you will never ever go back to the city through which you applied.
Oh, really?
Rather, you'll never go back there as your first office. Maybe later in your career you could transfer back there, but they just don't send you back home.
Why is that?
I don't know. I mean, I've heard the theories. Sorry. Let me
Oh, you're good.
This out.
You need a tissue or something?
No, I'm good. Just talking too much. Getting off a dry plane. I'm sorry, guys. Hope you can edit this out.
Oh, you're all good. I don't think we need to edit it. I don't think anyone really cares, you know?
No,
drop a like, drop a sub. I don't know. Buy some only gas. Do whatever you got to do. Buy some merch.
All right, let me try that answer again. The reason the FBI doesn't send new agents home, the legend is that they want them to have a new start. They want the FBI to kind of own them. They don't want them to be hanging out with their douchebag friends from high school who may be getting them into trouble. That's the theory. I don't know. I think it's one of those things, like a lot of things in life, where every generation's like, well, I didn't get sent back home. Why should we send the new guys home? And it just sort of it rolls downhill from there. Yeah. But I was a very rare guy in a very rare window of time where they were sending people back to their home office. So I got to go back to Chicago.
You got lucky.
I did. It's a great city. Good. A lot of crime.
I miss it so bad.
It's a wonderful city.
God, I miss it.
I don't, I want a little more than the 90 days of summer we get. But other than the weather, it's a world-class town.
I hate saying it. All my comments, every time I bring this up, they're always like, oh, you're so ungrateful. I would trade the Chicago weather all 4 seasons for this any day of the year.
Really? Oh,
any day of the year.
Not me. I hated the winter.
I get so bored of this 70-degree year-round weather. All the comments I know immediately, 70-degree year-round, you're complaining.
I got off the plane. It's so perfect here.
I can't stand it. I want snow. I want to open my window and have snow pouring, thick snow. The roads are slippery. Maybe there's a car accident.
You're from Chicago. I'm from Chicago. You know goddamn well that snow is only white.
It's going to be gross and muddy and brown.
It's only white for 48 hours.
But I still love it.
It's like black snow everywhere.
I still love it. I want to suffer through it because it's just fun. It's something different.
Yeah, and I get it. I mean, visually it's wonderful, but having
beautiful.
If you got a heated garage, maybe it's even better. But having to dig your car out of a parallel parked on Belmont Avenue.
I don't miss digging my car out of snow.
Yeah,
but
you're on your own.
Yeah, and the rust too. Oh my God.
Yeah, the beach is no treat for that, though.
True.
The salty air eats all my metal up.
I stay away from the beach, though. I don't go outside enough, so I don't have to worry about that issue. So you get Chicago, fortunately, and you get sent off there. What's it like early on in your career? What kind of stuff are you doing?
I hit the ground running. My first squad was a bank fraud squad. So I was investigating people and basically any way to rip off a bank without a threat of violence. And so a lot of embezzlements, a lot of people stealing money from the vault, a lot of people doing check kiting and check fraud scams and stuff like that. And so I did that for 6 years, and I got really good at interview and interrogation because I had a high volume of cases. I was carrying like 20 cases at a time and kind of cycling through them. These weren't the biggest cases in the world. There's not going to be any movies made from that stuff. But I was learning how to be an FBI agent. And I got really good at interviewing people and really good at interrogating the bad guy and getting them to confess to me, which puts the case on a fast track to a guilty plea. And so I was able to cycle through more cases. It was like an all-you-can-eat buffet. It was like a pie eating contest.
You're learning everything.
And it was great, yeah. And then the 9/11 attacks happened in 2001.
Oh, that probably shook things up.
It changed everything. I was getting ready to go out and interview somebody that morning, try to get a confession on some bank fraud case that the whole world has forgotten, and then planes start flying into buildings. And from that day on, I got switched over and became a terrorism agent on that day.
I'm going to guess that the guy you went and interviewed got extremely lucky that day. You were going to go interview
He owes
him.
Bin Laden a thank you card.
Yeah. That guy might go join the Al-Qaeda, dude. He really owes him.
Yeah.
So, early on, kind of before 2001, taking it back a little bit, do you remember what your very first assignment was? Your first case?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do. I mean, it's a crazy case.
What was it?
All right, you got a minute for a story?
Yeah. We have plenty of time here. We do long episodes usually.
So what they do at the FBI in Chicago is that they assign back in the day, I don't know what they do now, they assign new agents an impossible case, a case that's not going to be solved, some old dog case which has been reassigned from agent to agent to agent and never got made. And with the idea being, we're not going to give this new agent right out of the academy something significant to do. We're going to give them some BS case so they know how to hold their credentials right side up and just do the paperwork and kind of cycle through everything.
Acts as your training.
Yeah. But it's a real case, unlike the Hogan's Alley cases.
Yeah.
So the impossible case I was assigned was to catch a fugitive named Gilberto Granados Lopez. He was wanted in Chicago. He was actually found guilty at a trial in Chicago of trying to extort money from a children's charity back in like 1989, when I was a young guy, and long before I was an agent. And then sometime between his guilty plea and when he was supposed to report for his sentencing, he disappears, never to be seen again. And so I got assigned the case to find this guy 6-7 years after he had disappeared. So I didn't know anything about finding fugitives. So I go to the fugitive squad. And I grab this deputy U.S. Marshal. And I say, hey, listen, my name's Tom Simon. I'm a new agent. I just started this week. I've been assigned this case to catch a fugitive. I'm a CPA by trade. I don't know how to catch fugitives. What do you think? And I hand the file to him. And he kind of leafs through it. And he takes a look at it and goes, all right, this guy's Mexican. He went back to Mexico. Mexico ain't going to extradite him for this crime. So here's what you should do. Hand the file back to me. He goes, go to your desk, read a comic book, and then maybe in a couple months, people will assign you a case that you could actually solve. I was like, thanks. So I go back to my desk, and I'm like, oh, man, what am I going to do? This guy's in Mexico. They're not going to get him in Mexico. I go, well, listen. Then I got my head straight. This whole thing is just an exercise to teach me how to investigate. Why not go through the steps? So I start looking into the life of Gilberto Granados Lopez, going out and interviewing people who knew him back then, almost doing like a neighborhood canvas search. And people knew this guy from back in the day. Nick, back in the 1960s, he was the tango king of Chicago. No one had ever seen a dancer this good in Chicago.
Really?
Ever. He was the tango king. He was the king of the tango scene. I mean, the Aragon Ballroom, the Riviera, all these places where you and I may have seen rock shows.
He was hitting the tango at all of them.
Back in the 50s and 60s, those were elegant ballrooms for ballroom dancing, and this guy was the best.
Wow.
But again, that doesn't help me catch him, right, at this point. And so another thing I find out, which I thought was kind of interesting, is that you can receive Social Security. He was an older guy. If you're a fugitive. You can get your Social Security payments, which when you catch them and they're incarcerated, they're no longer eligible for that. And so I find out from the Social Security Administration that every month his Social Security was being deposited into a little community bank on the south side of Chicago.
Oh.
Pretty good lead, right?
Yeah, you got something.
Right, so I head down there. I talk to the bank president. I say, hey, listen, blah, 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 blah. I identify myself, hold my credentials out. He explains to me that he can't really give me documents, but he can let me know that this guy, that he does have an account here at the bank, and every month the Social Security Administration deposits the money, but he hasn't touched it. And it's just accumulating there. And I was like, all right. So I give him my business card. I said, if he comes in to get his money, you call me, and I'm going to come into the bank with my gun. I'm going to say, "Just get down, FBI." And so he's like, yeah, kid. And so I leave. So that was a dead end lead. And so, but I was still interviewing so many people who knew him from like the tango days. One day I get in the mail a letter. Now, I know you're a young guy, but a letter is what they used to have before email. It was like an envelope.
I've gotten letters.
You put a stamp on it. Guy would bring it across the country to you.
You forgot I'm in debt. I get plenty of letters.
So the letter, though, was a photocopy of a page of a magazine. It was the letters to the editor page from a recent issue of Dancing USA magazine. Oh. Now, I know you're a subscriber, but Dancing USA magazine was unfamiliar to me at the time. It's a trade publication for the ballroom dancing industry. And the page on the letter to the editor was, Dear Dancing USA magazine, I recently read your article about the Aragon Ballroom in Chicago. Back when I was the tango king of Chicago, it was a beautiful place to be. And, it is such a shame that it has fallen into disrepair and is now hosting rock and roll shows. Signed, Gilberto Granados Lopez. Oh. So what is this? And look at it, and the issue of the magazine was from the previous month. So help me out, play detective. What do we know about him now?
He's out there somewhere.
He's alive.
He's alive and well.
Right.
Yep.
What else do you think we know about him?
He's still paying close attention to dance.
Okay,
He's
fair
still
enough.
very interested in it.
Right. He's very prideful about
Might
his time.
still be dancing.
Talk to me about the magazine.
He's a subscriber.
Right, because he probably didn't pick that up at Walgreens, did he? Right?
Yep, he subscribed most likely to Dancers Weekly or whatever.
Dancing USA magazine, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I think, too. This guy's a subscriber. Now I run into the problem, how the hell do I find out anything about him from that? This is pre-internet, Nick. So this is 1996 when this is going down, 95, 96. And so I start calling around to dance studios in Chicago, and I find an Arthur Murray dance studio on Lincoln Avenue who takes my call. And I said, this is the FBI calling. I got a crazy question. Do you subscribe to Dancing USA magazine? And they go, yeah, we got a bunch of old copies sitting in the waiting room when the kids come in for tap dance lessons. The parents look at it. They're bored out of their minds. I go, can you do me a favor and go grab a copy and bring it to the phone? Guy comes back to the phone, opens it up, and I go to the front two, 3 pages. You're going to see like the masthead where it has the editor and all that. Can you tell me where this magazine's published? And he goes, it's published in Des Moines, Iowa. I was like, all right, thank you very much. And so I called Des Moines Directory Assistance, get the number for Dancing USA magazine. Call up. This is simple times. I explained that I was an FBI agent. I'm looking for a fugitive who I believe is a subscriber. Can you check your subscription records and tell me if you have a subscription for Gilberto Granados Lopez? Lady comes back and goes, yes, we do. And she gives me the address where he gets the magazine every month in Mexicali, Mexico. So,
still something though.
Something, but again, you come back to the idea that Mexico's not going to extradite him. This isn't such a case that the FBI is going to fly SEAL Team 6 in to get him.
Yeah, you've basically just gotten confirmation of what you kind of knew in the back of your head.
Right,
most of the time.
Right. But I've still kind of failed in my ostensible mission to catch this son of a bitch.
Yep.
And so I go back, and I had an idea a couple weeks later. I thought, you know what? Why don't I send a letter to him?
Oh.
So I hop on Microsoft Word, create a letterhead that says the Fletcher Group, and I write a letter to him. I said, Dear Gilberto Granados Lopez, my name's Tom Fletcher. I'm a TV producer for the Fletcher Group. We've been assigned by PBS to do a documentary series on America's greatest ballrooms.
Ooh.
And we're aware of your reputation as the Tango King of Chicago and your reputation with the Aragon Ballroom. And we want to fly you all the way to Chicago and have you interviewed at the Aragon Ballroom by famous actor and tango dancer Robert Duvall.
Oh, you've got him on the hook, I think.
Did you know that Robert Duvall was a tango dancer?
I did not, no.
But I bet he did.
Well, that's true. That's very true.
So if you're interested in doing this, please give me a call at this number. We really hope that you will help us recapture the glory of the Aragon Ballroom. Signed, Tom Fletcher. The phone number I gave was a little landline phone sitting on my desk that was only to be used for undercover operations. So put a stamp on it, a couple stamps, go to Mexico, send it off. I'm thinking, well, this is the biggest long shot in the world. A few days later, 5-6 days later, the phone rings, that undercover phone. I answer the phone. Hello. It's him. It's Gilberto Granados Lopez.
Wow, that's got to be a crazy feeling having him on the other end of the line.
And Nick, he is so excited to be part of this documentary. He cannot wait to come out to the Aragon Ballroom, recapture his glory as the Tango King of Chicago, and be interviewed by his hero, actor and tango dancer Robert Duvall. And so I said, okay, well, I'd love to fly out there. What dates are good for you? We pick a date in December 1996, a couple weeks into the future. I said, I'm going to send you a round-trip ticket. I go pay, using an undercover credit card, a round-trip ticket, mail it to him there in Mexico. And so here we are a couple weeks later. I'm standing there, pre-9/11, end of the jet bridge, little sign in my hand, Gilberto Granados Lopez, watching people get off the plane. Person after person after person is getting off the plane, none of whom were Gilberto Granados Lopez.
No.
Eventually, the crew starts to get off. The guys with the brooms start to get on. And just as I'm getting ready to fold up my sign and head back to the office with my tail between my legs, I see him walking down the jet bridge. He'd gotten older over this time as a fugitive. Being a fugitive will age you, Nick.
It's stressful.
He's shuffling down. He sees me holding up a sign with his name on it, and his eyes lit up, and he starts walking a little faster. He walks up and he goes, Mr. Fletcher? I go, Mr. Lopez? He puts his hand out to shake my hand. I put my hand in his hand, put it behind his back, put the handcuffs on, and take him in.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you actually solved that first case that they threw you.
It was crazy. No one was expecting it. I was the last guy to expect it. But yes, that was like my first case out of the gate, and I was able to solve that one. Funny little epilogue. So he ends up getting sentenced by the same judge who actually proceeded over his trial. He had not retired. He gets 8 years in prison. And so here's a little epilogue to the story. Time marches on. The 9/11 attacks happen. I make it to a terrorism squad. I'm flying around the world trying to stop the blood money from going to Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups. And my phone rings at my desk. I answer it, FBI, Special Agent Simon here. And it's this voice on the other end of the phone going, he's here, he's here. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Who are you looking for me? Is it the wrong number? You know, he's here, he's here. I'm like, who is here? What are you talking about? It was the banker. Gilberto Granados Lopez served his entire sentence, got out of prison, and went to the bank to get his Social Security money from years ago. I had never told the bank manager that I had caught him. He had been sitting there for 8 years with my business card sitting by his desk just in case Gilberto Granados Lopez came in.
Can you imagine how excited that bank manager was when he walked in that day?
Can you imagine how crestfallen he was when I told him that this guy has been, I forgot to tell you, I caught him 8 years ago. He has paid his debt to society. Give him his money and tell him I said hi.
He had been waiting for that day all 8 years.
This was the most exciting day of his life, and I stole it from him.
That's awful. Do you remember how he reacted?
The banker?
Yeah.
Oh, he was a professional about it.
Of course.
But I you know that this was a big day for him, and he was so excited.
Yep.
And he probably had like any number of the staff there like kind of doing song and dance numbers for him when all he wants is his money to stall him until young FBI agent Simon
he had
gets
it
there to put him
perfectly
down.
orchestrated to waste his time. He was ready for you.
I spent 8 years rehearsing, briefing the staff, holding up the photo.
Every new hire that they had, they were training.
Yeah,
All right, so
yeah,
when
yeah,
Gilberto walks in,
I stole
here's
his
what
thunder.
we do.
I stole his thunder. Yeah.
Wow, so you actually solved that first case, which I'd imagine probably helped your career a lot early on.
I think it helped my reputation in Chicago as a guy who could make cases. I mean, by that it wasn't that wasn't my only case, right? At some point, the Tango King capture took a long time. It became a kind of a pet project for me. But I'm being assigned, at that point I'm on a bank fraud squad. So I'm being assigned actual bank fraud cases and showing some success at investigating financial crimes. And then having to catch that fugitive was just sort of a funny story that I've gotten to tell for the past 30 years.
Was there anyone you remember from early on that managed to get away or elude you guys?
Oh yeah, I had a case, man. This case still haunts me. John and Julianne Demetrian. This is when I was in Honolulu. They were running a mortgage repair company. So like people who had bad credit, who wanted to get a mortgage on their house.
I'm going to need them.
Or rather, I'm sorry, who had fallen behind on the mortgages to their house. And so they're facing the potential foreclosure because they've fallen into some financial hard times, or maybe they bought too much house or whatever. What they did is they were basically creating a company that would basically repair your credit and allow you to stay in your house mortgage free. But in order to do that, you had to sign your house over to them. And then they were doing all sorts of financial games. And eventually the houses get foreclosed upon after these guys get loans on the house and to suck whatever equity is left out of them. So John and Julianne Demetrian were getting rich, and lots of good people in Hawaii were getting homeless. And so John and Julian Demetrian, much like the Tango King, come in and plead guilty to mortgage fraud. But the federal system of criminal justice is very humane. If you're not considered a flight risk or a danger to the community, you are not being held in jail awaiting your sentences. You go home to get your affairs in order, have sex with your wife for the last time or whatever, and then you come in for your sentencing. And even then, after your sentencing, you don't have to report to the Bureau of Prisons for 90 days later. Somewhere in that window of time, after they plead guilty in their sentencing, we all show up at the sentencing, and John and Julian Demetrian are gone. They had disappeared, and they became fugitives. And we were able to, and Hawaii is sort of a funny place to be a fugitive, right? Because you begin immediately, first thing you do, take a look at the airplane records and boat records. Who's left the island? Because, if you're going on a cruise ship to Los Angeles, there's going to be a record of that.
All of that's recorded.
If you're hopping on Delta, United, American, or Hawaiian Airlines to head back to the U.S. mainland, that's going to be somewhere. John and Julian Demetrian weren't on any of those lists. They had disappeared. And they sure as heck weren't in Hawaii, right? Because they're radioactive there. What we later found out is that they had fallen in with the sovereign citizen movement. You ever heard of those guys?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, that's a whole
I've heard
other
plenty
show.
about them. Fascinating.
Yeah, crazies. But there was a rich sob sitting in Alabama who was going to be starting a new government called the Republic of the United States of America, not to be confused with the existing United States of America.
Yep.
And he had a rich doctor who was kind of like one of his acolytes, one of his followers, who chartered a plane to get John and Julian Demetrian flown out of Honolulu on a private plane from Honolulu to, I think, Salt Lake City, Utah, and then it was like an underground railroad of sovereign citizens transporting them to a trailer in Dothan, Alabama. And then the trail goes cold. I ended up retiring from the FBI years later, and they are still at large. They outsmarted me. They never caught me. I never caught them, and here we are today. So I'm here to say to your viewers, John and Julianne, if you're watching, let's grab a beer. Let's bury the hatchet, grab a beer. We'll talk. Celebrate old times. I'm not an agent anymore. I would love to catch up and find out
it's
how
over
you're doing.
with now. It's all, you're not after them anymore.
Yeah, now I'm not after them anymore.
That's right. That's right.
That case has been reassigned to better and smarter agents who have also yet to catch them. So
wow, that's fascinating that they just disappeared.
Sometimes they get away.
How do you think they disappeared? Like, what possibly could have
Well,
happened?
I think what happened was John got online, met this guy who wanted to form this new version of the United States, and said, listen, I'm a financial whiz. I would love to be your Secretary of the Treasury. And basically convinces this guy, the sovereign citizen guy, who's going to start his own nation and overthrow the U.S. government, that he's going to be so pivotal toward funding this new government that he wants to form, but that can only happen if you help us escape. And then he helped them escape.
That guy seems like the kind of guy who's already on the FBI's radar.
He's
before John came into his contact.
He's serving, I think, like a life sentence right now. Yeah,
probably fitting.
Well, I mean, these guys don't pay taxes. They don't have like license plates in their cars. They're marching to the beat of their own drummer.
Yeah, they're racking up charges by the day for sure. It sounds like
for a government they don't believe exists, so it's nothing to them.
Do you think John and his wife are still out there?
Absolutely,
Are they alive?
100%.
Wow. What makes you think that?
I think they're still in contact with their parents through a kind of secure, kind of VPN style app-based stuff. Yeah. Last I heard that they're still very much in touch with their parents, checking in with them, letting them know they're alive and well.
You think they're still in the U.S.?
I don't know that. I don't know that. Here's what I do know. The government has their passports.
Yep.
But, you don't have to be James Bond to leave the U.S.
Yeah, you can definitely figure it out without your passport.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they slip over to Mexico. Next thing you know, they're a flight to the Philippines or something.
Yep.
I mean, there's any number of good guesses, but there's still a reward out for their heads. So.
Yeah, I think Hawaii was probably the most difficult part for them to get out of. Once they got out of Hawaii, they got a lot more.
We've had
room
plenty.
to play with.
I chased a ton of fugitives when I was in Hawaii, and as long as they're on the island, we're going to catch them, right? Because there's 1 million people who live in Hawaii, and then about 1 million tourists on any given day. The tourists don't care about anything, so kind of leave them out of it. But the people who live in Hawaii, it's a pretty small community. I mean, you take a look at any American city, 1 million people is not that big, and so and everyone there watches local news because they're obsessed with everything local, and we controlled the local news. I mean, there's not a lot of crime in Hawaii. So when I wanted to get a story out there in the local news, I called my reporter friends, and next thing you know, I'm leading the news that day, kind of asking people to cooperate to help find this fugitive, or help us on the hunt for John and Julian Demetrian. And so so I'm positive they're not hiding in Hawaii. That would just be so impossible. I mean, it's been like a decade too, or more, that they've been at large.
Wow, that's got to be so frustrating to be pursuing them for that long and just.
You don't take it personally. I mean, all I can do is all I can do.
Yep.
And so yeah, but I guess my greater point, and you asked a very simple question, I gave you a very long-winded answer, is you can't catch them all. There's successes and failures, and you hope that over the balance of a 26-year career, you're able to help out them and keep Americans more safe than the ones that get by you. It's like a hockey game.
I like that. That's a good way to sum that up.
Yeah.
I like that. So you had mentioned how once 9/11 happened, your career pretty much took a 180.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it was a crazy day, but getting past that, the first couple of weeks after the 9/11 attacks, all agents are working a 12-hour shift, either like 7 in the morning to 7 at night or 7 at night to 7 in the morning. And and calls are coming in from the public and from getting communications from intelligence agencies. Because you don't know when, we thought the next wave of attacks was going to happen on September 12th. I mean, we didn't know if we were at war as a nation, and if so, who were we at war with? And so you're knocking on a lot of people's doors, and just talking to people, kind of building up an intelligence base. And I guess I had done a good job during that window of time, because one day as things are kind of calmed down, I go back to my bank fraud squad, I get a call, hey, we need you to come into the boss's office. The boss is the special agent in charge, the number one guy in Chicago. And so I get brought in, and when there's like 5 other agents there. There's like me, and I was at the time again, I'm not saying I was the best agent, but I had the best statistical accomplishments in Chicago for making the most number of cases.
Nice.
Okay? I want to be clear, though. There's other agents who are working bigger, better cases, but I was a volume guy. And so I was like the financial guy. And then there was another guy who was an organized crime agent who was very successful in that career. There was another guy who was he was like a military intelligence background guy and like kind of like stuff like that. And there was a violent crime guy who was doing kind of like RICO cases on like on gangs and stuff like that. And so basically they took a bunch, like 5 agents from the different disciplines and the different squads, and we all sort of knew each other because these are the guys you see around the office, but I didn't know these guys real well. And they gathered us together and said, we want to form a new squad, a new team with you 5 guys. And here's you have one case and one mission, and you're going to work as a team. The mission is to cut off the blood money going to Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups. The specific mission, though, here in Chicago is we got 2 charities out in Bridgeview that were and these charities are taking money from good Muslims, telling them that they're going to funnel this money to the poor and needy of the Muslim world. And unlike Catholic kids, the Muslims actually do tithe, and they give like 10% of their income to the poor.
Oh, wow. They take that seriously.
They call it zakat, yeah, right? The Catholics just pretend they're going to do that. But the Muslims actually do it. And so these charities are bringing in a ton of money from good Muslims, and instead of funneling that money to the poor and needy, they were going to Islamic fighting groups, including Al-Qaeda. And so that was the theory of the case. Then it was now we need you guys to prove it in a way that you can prove it in court. So we worked this case for 3 to 4 years. We dismantled these charities. We took their money. We kind of publicly explained to the Muslims that we don't see you as bad people who are supporting terrorism. We see you as victims of a fraud, right? Because if I'm telling you that I'm going to give this money to a poor kid, then I'm using that money for hand warmers for the trigger pullers in Chechnya, then I'm defrauding you. And so we tried to get that message across, and I think we probably failed doing that because the Muslims were pretty pissed at us for closing down their charities.
For sure.
But then we were able to deport a lot of the people that we couldn't prove, and then throw in prison some of the leaders that we were able to establish beyond a reasonable doubt were doing that. And so that sort of was kind of this 5 year, 5 years, several, 3-4 year time out from my career as a financial crimes investigator. But even then, I was the financial guy on the team.
Yep.
So
that had to have been a super exciting period for you. Like
it was. I mean,
it sounds like that was closer to where you wanted to be when you thought of being an FBI agent.
Maybe.
Yeah?
I mean, again, the counterterrorism work's sort of funny because we were trying to prove something that happened in the past. It was more what I was used to. But a lot of the counterterrorism work that they're doing is trying to prevent the next terrorist attack before it happens, right? It's almost like that movie Minority Report. And so you end up like talking to a lot of people that this guy's acting weird. He's meeting with a bunch of guys. He's, maybe buying, a lot of fertilizer when he's not a farmer, and just things like that. And then you go talk to them. So those guys, I think, the counterterrorism agents, they're destroying and breaking up and disrupting terrorist plots every day, and they don't even know it. Just by like talking to somebody, they're like, "Well, let's scatter." And but you don't have this historical crime that you're investigating, and that's the model of investigations that I've always done better at. I'm not the guy that you want to like kind of wire up against the drug kingpin and stuff like that. I want to investigate crimes that have happened in the past.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it sounds really difficult to pursue terror because it's like you have to find the ingredients of it. Like you have to be like, okay, well, look, they're about to do this. That seems borderline impossible.
It's such an impossible mission because, I mean, again, investigating a terrorist attack is one thing, but preventing the next terrorist attack without violating people's rights, it's a fine line. I mean, I had to do it for a few years, and I don't think I was necessarily great at it, honestly, because I was always just sort of, I don't know. Is this guy going to do something bad? I don't know. I mean, every day you drove by the Sears Tower and looked at it and it's still standing. You're like, well, I guess I did a job well done. Yep. It's difficult to figure out what your wins are because, I mean, eventually you go out and you talk to the subject of the investigation, you knock on their door and give them a very kind of tough interview about, are you seeking to harm the U.S. in any way? And they're always going to deny it. And hopefully you put the fear of God into them.
A bit off topic. How do you feel that they're trying to call it the Willis Tower now?
It's always annoyed me.
Yeah, I don't like that either.
But when I left, it was Sears Tower, and then somewhere since then it became Willis Tower. It'll always be the Sears Tower.
It is Sears Tower.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
I think it's Sears Tower forever.
Do the locals still call it that?
For sure.
Good.
Yeah, I don't know a single person that I know from back home or my family that calls it Willis Tower.
That's good.
But we might be a few years away from that. These kids now, it doesn't have Sears on there anymore. It's Willis now.
Yeah, soon it'll be the Gulf of America too.
Oh God, dude, stop changing all the shit, dude. Everything's fine, dude. Gulf of Mexico, Sears Tower,
Comiskey Park.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. Leave it be. Leave it be. So, outside of those charities that you pursued, are there any other cases that you investigated while you were on the terror squad that really stood out to you?
Let me think. In my counterterrorism time, I think that was like my only counterterrorism case that I was focused on. When I got to Jacksonville, we did a lot of. I did a bunch of counterterrorism cases that were trying to prevent that next terrorist. Actually, no, there was one in Chicago that was kind of fun. I could tell you about. So. I can't get into too many specifics because of how we knew. There was a guy that we were concerned about, okay, living in a apartment building in the Chicago suburbs, that he was going to do something bad, an attack of some kind. The intel wasn't great, but it was enough to look into him. And so I'm looking into this guy, trying to assess, is he up to no good? And so one thing we like to do sometimes at the FBI is what we call a trash cover. And that's where we actually go to your home and we steal the trash on garbage day and bring it home and go through
I've heard about this.
And bring
this
it.
Is a real thing?
Go through it, looking to see who your bills are and stuff like that. So I did a lot of trash covers. It's disgusting work because half the time it's filled with diaper and curries.
Sounds horrible, yeah.
Problem is this guy, this potential terrorist that we were looking into, he lived in a big apartment building where everyone just brought their garbage and threw it into a dumpster.
Oh. That's what we do here.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't do a trash cover in this building for you. I mean, you drive yourself crazy, like, in the middle of the night, kind of going through bag after bag after bag and trying to find something with your name on it. So, but I really wanted to do a trash cover on this guy because I thought it would give a little more clarity into what he's up to because we were really concerned about what he's up to. We didn't have enough probable cause to do a search warrant. And I didn't want to interview the guy just then. And so, you'll appreciate this. You're a former Chicago guy. Remember the blue bags?
Yes.
Okay. The blue bag, explain what the blue bags were.
I want you to explain it for the viewer.
Okay. So when Chicago implemented their recycling system for the city, you would basically throw your recyclables in a blue trash bag as opposed to a black or a white one. And you tie that up, and allegedly that blue bag would make its way to a recycling center with the
alleged is a key
with the
word.
Newspaper or aluminum. You and I know that's horseshit. But the suburbs never bought into this. The suburbs never did the blue bags, at least not this guy's suburb. And so what I did was, do you remember, gosh, you're so young. Do you remember Peapod? Was Peapod still a thing in Chicago?
No.
Peapod was a very, very early internet grocery delivery service.
That sounds I might remember it from when I was like a kid.
Yeah, maybe.
When I was
it was revolutionary. The idea you would go grocery shopping on the internet, early days of the internet, and then the Peapod truck would arrive and like bring your shit up to your apartment, which is great. Cause
I'm pretty sure I do remember this, but like I was young.
Right. So I dressed up like a UPS guy, created a fake Peapod letterhead and a fake Peapod package, and told this guy, let's say his name was Saeed, and Saeed put his name in everything and made it look like an official thing. I said, hey, Peapod is now in your area. We would love for you to use Peapod as a token of our appreciation. Here is a free box of trash bags from Peapod. And I got some blue trash bags from Home Depot from Chicago, bright blue. Put them in there, wrapped it up, deliver it to his house, dressed as a UPS guy. His family takes it, and then his family takes it. A couple weeks later, I go back, look in the dumpster. What am I looking for? Bright blue trash bags. There was no blue bag system in his suburb, so I was taking the blue trash bags from the dumpster, and then I opened them, and we've got lots of evidence that we're able to deport him with.
Listen, guys, sorry for the little cut right there. Our sign almost fell and killed everybody, so we had to jump in. We had to jump in. I can't let Tom get hurt.
Not all heroes wear capes. Thanks for saving us.
That's right. That's right. Today was my heroic moment. So going back to more of your heroic moments, doing some FBI stuff. After the terror squad, it sounds like, you kind of went back to financial crime once again?
Yeah, no, I got put on a political corruption squad at that point.
Oh, that's interesting.
To catch crooked politicians. And you'll be shocked to learn there's a lot of crooked politicians in Chicago.
One of the things that I've been waiting to ask you about is you've talked a lot about Blagojevich, who was our old governor. He is one of my favorite politicians because of just how hilariously corrupt he was.
He was a mess. He was a mess from day one. And so, by way of background, because not everyone's from Chicago.
For sure, yeah.
Rob Blagojevich was elected the governor of Illinois. And during that window of time, there was a big problem in Illinois politics, and this didn't originate with Blagojevich, was what we call pay for play. The people who got the jobs and the people who got the contracts to paint the fire hydrants, do this or that, were people who made sizable political contributions to Chicago politicians. It's the patronage system going back to Al Capone. Blagojevich kind of was that on steroids. And so there was so we were able to get up on a wiretap on him for basically him shaking down contractors for political contributions in exchange for contracts. And so that was the pretense of our wiretap. And now this was happening around the time that Barack Obama was running for president for his first term. Now, Barack Obama at the time was the senior senator from Illinois. And so if he were to win the presidency, which of course he did, that creates a vacancy in the Senate, right? The state of Illinois has 2 senators. Barack Obama was one of them. Now Illinois has 1 senator. The governor is the guy who gets to appoint, gets to pick the person who would take Barack Obama's spot in the Senate. Blagojevich knew this and realized that he had something in his hands that was golden. So he began talking to people on this phone while we're on the wiretap, while I'm listening to I'm on a team of people, right? I don't want to make it seem like this is my case. There's a dozen of us or more working this case at the time, but I was supervising the wiretap of his home at the time, where he spent most of his time, because he never really went down to Springfield, the state capital. He tried to be the governor from the Ravenswood neighborhood where he lived. And he's out there basically soliciting bribes for Barack Obama's Senate seat.
It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, and so we had and it was really overt on the calls what he was going to do. So we have this crisis. Do we let him appoint someone to be the senator from Illinois, or do we step in right before he does it to stop it so we don't create some constitutional crisis? The decision, which was made way above my pay grade, was to stop this thing before it actually was consummated. He was arrested, went to trial for corruption charges, gets a hung jury on the first trial. There was 1 juror who did not believe that the government had risen to its burden of proof.
Really?
They retry him a second time. He's found guilty, and the judge just throws the book at him and gives him an astronomical amount of time.
He was supposed to still be in jail.
So here's what happens. So during this window of time, we've talked about this earlier. Again, he's not sitting in a jail cell. He's not a flight risk or a real danger to the community. He had the governorship had been stripped from him. He needs to make some money, right? He's got these legal expenses. So he decides to go on a game show. That game show was called Celebrity Apprentice, and the game show host was a guy named Donald Trump. And so Blagojevich goes on the game show, does fairly well, and and meets Mr. Trump, the host of this game show. Then Blagojevich goes away to prison after the show. While he's in prison, something very unexpected happens. That game show host becomes the president of the United States of America. And Donald Trump, whether you like him or hate him, he's very, very loyal to his friends. Right?
100%.
Right? So if you're a supporter of Donald Trump and someone that he regards as a friend, he is a good friend to you. And he was such a good, and so he remembered that Rob Blagojevich, this guy who was in a lot of trouble at the time, took the time to go on his show and was very good on his show. And so President Trump commutes the sentence of Rod Blagojevich and lets him out of prison when he still had 3 or 4 or 5 years left in his sentence. And then when President Trump became president the second time around, he gave him a full pardon, so he's no longer regarded as a convicted felon.
Oh, I didn't know he fully pardoned him.
Yeah,
I knew about the commutation.
It was that week where Trump was in office and he was pardoning
just fired them
everybody.
All
yeah,
off.
He was just making it rain with pardons.
Yep.
Yeah, and so Blagojevich got a pardon.
It's just insane that guy got out of jail for that, because that is like, when I think of corruption, obviously I don't know about a lot of it, and you know way more than I do. That is like what I would think of like a Looney Tunes cartoon exemplifying like political corruption.
And he was shaking down Children's Hospital in Lincoln Park for money. I mean, it was off the charts. It was bad. But here's what I'll say. The sentence was really harsh, right? I mean, he got like 15, 16 years for that. And the judge wanted to make an example out of him. He served, I don't know what he served, 10, 11, 12, 13 years?
Yeah, it was around that.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I never ever, as an agent who worked hard to put people in prison, got hung up on how much time they spend in prison, right? The idea that Rod Blagojevich is going to be out there robbing banks or he's a danger to society is crazy. I hope he lives a happy and successful life. I heard he was being considered to be an ambassador to Bosnia, which I think it's
that's
it
fascinating.
No, not Bosnia, Serbia. So it's where his family is and all that. And so listen, I have no ill will toward the guy. I did my job's not to punish him. My job's just to find out what happened in the wiretap. And so I have no ill will toward the guy. I mean, and it's not like he's going to be elected governor again and can do anything like that.
Certainly
again.
not.
And so in that sense, he's probably very rehabilitated.
I think he's got a bright future ahead doing books and podcasts, for sure.
He's a smart guy despite running a pretty dumb crime, and he's super articulate and likable. You don't get to be the governor of Illinois unless you're a likable guy.
Yeah, there's 100% a certain level of charm to get to that level of politics.
I mean,
for sure.
He's really smart. I mean, he went to Pepperdine Law School. He's a bright guy. Yeah.
So I'm curious to ask you, as someone who is really, on the other side of the fence fighting it, everyone from Illinois kind of regards Illinois politics as like a joke. Everyone views it as very corrupt, right? From Blagojevich, that's the most notorious situation. But like in general, a lot of my family and friends, like Illinois politics aren't serious. Illinois politicians aren't serious. And it's kind of, I don't know if myth or rumor is the word for it, but it's like every Illinois politician just kind of expect like they're probably doing something. Is that accurate, or how true is that?
Well, let's focus on Chicago, right?
For sure.
Chicago has been an armpit of corruption since before you and I were born. That said, there are honest Chicago politicians, and but it's that whole patronage thing. The idea that in Chicago, if you want to be a garbage person, you had better really help your alderman get elected by raising money and kind of going door to door for him. And then your alderman's going to make sure your job at the sanitation department is taken care of. And so what that system does is it makes a pretty efficient government. The garbage gets picked up, right? Chicago is not a city that you walk around and you just see like piles of garbage everywhere and graffiti everywhere.
It's beautiful.
It's a very, very well taken care of city. The question is, could it be that well taken care of at a much cheaper price without kind of this patronage system? Are we bringing people in because they're the second cousin of the alderman, or are we bringing people into government jobs because they're the most qualified for that job? I think that's the unanswered question there.
And do you define, when people are bringing in their second cousins or people who are helping them out, is that like a certain level of corruption you view?
It's clearly it's corruption, but it's not necessarily illegal. That's
interesting. Yeah, because I view that as almost like a Midwestern, like you scratch my back, I scratch yours.
And to be clear, the FBI is not throwing people in prison for hiring their second cousin to be a toll collector.
For sure, yeah.
Right? But as a taxpayer, do I think that's the way their government in our world should work? No. No, the fact that I gave a political contribution should have zero impact about whether I get hired as an FBI agent, for example.
Absolutely.
I'm kind of a meritocracy guy. The best person should get the job. And if we want to create some sort of mechanism where we're bringing in more minorities to apply for those jobs, I'm open to that idea. But let's do that at the job fairs.
Yeah.
Let's go to the job fairs and encourage people to apply for
do it based
jobs.
On merit and not based on,
absolutely. Let's get the best best people in government.
Who's my closest relative?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And what ends up happening is you get a lot of people who get no-show jobs in local government, and the FBI has prosecuted several people, or arrested a lot of people for no-show jobs.
Have you heard about? I'm sure you probably have, considering you were investigating politicians in Illinois. Have you heard about Tiffany Henyard. She was the mayor of what town in Illinois?
Was it Dixon?
Yes,
Yeah.
Dixon.
People are constantly asking me about that case. I just haven't looked into it. But she was just feathering a nest.
So she is like very egregious with her like mishandling of the town's money, and is like openly having town halls where she's arguing with the chief of police there, like, well, you can get the hell off the force then, like you can get out of here. And she's like, apparently she spent something like 70 grand on bags on one of her trips, and it was all city money. And somehow she is like not indicted or anything for this. I mean, what
hasn't been charged?
No, not that I'm aware of. I mean, maybe that something's been updated, but it's almost certain they're investigating her at least, probably, right?
I think if there's credible allegations that she was feathering her nest with government money or doing something corrupt. I mean, I know that Chicago has sort of the best, and most muscular public corruption squads in the FBI because there's so much of it, and I can't believe they're not investigating. I just don't know enough about the specific case.
Definitely, after the show, look into it. It's fascinating.
I mean, there's no one who's off limits to the Chicago corruption squad. There's nobody who's untouchable.
Well, if they got Blagojevich, this chick going down too.
You'd think.
Sure.
Yeah, you'd think.
So you're fighting this corruption. Are there any other cases that stood out to you outside
I had
of
a case called Operation Crooked Code.
Okay.
That has a Wikipedia entry.
I like the nickname.
That I didn't write. Yeah, I came up with the name. I love coming up with cool names for my cases as opposed to just because the default's just like the bad guy's name. So Operation Crooked Code was a case that I investigated. I was a case agent on this one, and I had a large team of people helping me with the wiretaps where it was people paying bribes to builders and contractors, paying bribes to building inspectors to have them overlook shoddy work and stuff like that. So
it's messed up.
I mean, there was, again, you're young, but when I was in Chicago, there were what do you call them? Young people would have these parties in Lincoln Park, right? That's the neighborhood in Chicago that you go to, or Wicker Park. I guess I'm dating myself. When you're like 22 years old and you have your first job in marketing or something like that. And they'd have these fantastic parties. They'd all be standing out in the kind of wooden deck fire escape behind the 3 flats in Chicago. And a few of those things just come out from the walls and like dozens and dozens of like school teachers and yoga instructors and nice young kids in their first job out of college were just getting killed. And these things these structures all had valid building permits. And so the question was always, what's going on in the building department? What are these building inspectors really doing? And what's it going to take to get a building inspector out there immediately and have them pass something that ought not to pass? And so we conducted an investigation involving wiretaps on several different phone lines, informants, and kind of viewing through surveillances and the wiretaps the actual process of a plumbing contractor needing to get this plumbing inspection done, even though the plumbing is not up to code. Going through an expediter, this middleman who's then now paying a bribe to the building inspector to show that thing getting passed. We were able to have many transactions during the course of the wiretap, showing it from the infancy of the phone calls to the expediter, and then having surveillance there filming the actual handoff of the cash. It was a fantastic case. We must have locked up 20 contractors, 1 expediter, and several different people from the building department in Chicago. And I think probably for decades we cleaned it up a bit, and that nobody out there was taking envelopes at Christmas anymore from their favorite plumbing contractor.
What do you do if, while you're investigating this, let's say you find a building that was inspected and certified that shouldn't have been? What happens to the building?
Well, I mean, what happens is after we made the case, we told them about one particular building that we were sort of using as our test case that just had all this crappy work. And, and they went through and kind of ripped off all the city, in order to kind of do damage control, kind of withdrew all of the building inspections for that building, and the contractor who owned it needed to basically re-gut it and rebuild and re-renovate it to make sure it was safe to be inhabited. But there's no way we caught them all. So there's a lot of buildings, a lot of buildings in Chicago. Again, this is a long time ago, back in the day, that were like inherently unsafe. But some of them were structurally unsafe. But some of them just, you would flush the toilet and you'd have a geyser of sewage come up at you. And so some of the stuff is just super inconvenient, bad carpentry is going to make your, everything bow. Bad electricity is just, you're constantly going to be like throwing your breakers and blowing fuses. So not everything in there was a death trap the way the fire escapes were.
I'm kind of curious, what spurs an investigation like that? Was it a specific incident of a real mishap?
We had an informant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that one we had an informant who got himself in some trouble. And he told us the story because he was trying to make a deal for himself about how it all really works in Chicago. And this one particular expediter that was the go-to guy if you needed to get a bad place inspected. He was the guy who would be the bagman for the bribes. And so that's the guy you go up on the wiretap on because he's catching it on the contractor side, and then he's the one who's actually handing off the bribe. See, if you go on a wiretap on one dirty building inspector, you're only going to catch his transactions. You go to the middleman, the bagman who's paying the bribes, you're going to be able to catch 20 of them.
Yeah, you got everybody.
Yeah, so that's what we did.
Wow, that's fascinating. So if it wasn't a kind of chance situation where you had that informant that got in trouble, this might have never been a case.
Yeah, I mean, there's other ways cases kind of come about, and it takes just the initiative of an agent to believe in a case.
How frequently is a case started off like a tip from an informant?
Again, most of my career, again, we're talking a lot of my non-fraud cases, but most of my career were just sort of benign fraud cases, and all of those begin with the 99% of the time, those begin from somebody who's been ripped off in a fraud. Help me, I've been robbed. I invested in this program, and I was told my money would double in 90 days, and I think the guy just bought lottery tickets with the money. So usually there's a victim. So most cases arise from that. But every FBI agent has to have a certain number of informants. They call them confidential human sources who are working underneath them. I always did. My career, I probably had over 100 of them. And those are the people out there on the streets kind of feeding you in criminal intelligence in your area of responsibility. And then a lot of cases rise from those. But a lot of referrals to police also arise from those. And so so the FBI has one foot firmly planted in the world of investigations, but it also has one foot firmly planted in the world of intelligence gathering, whether it's criminal intelligence or national security intelligence.
How do you find those sources?
You get good at it. First, there's different ways to do it. Sometimes the sources that I find the least productive are the ones who are forced to be a source at the tip of a sword because they don't want to go to prison as long. Those guys aren't self-starters. And so I'll tell you a quick story.
Okay.
You identify people who I would sure love for that person to be a source, and then there's a program on how you would recruit them. And so there was a guy I had a case on a Palestinian credit card fraud ring. Okay. Oak Lawn.
Interesting. And I have a lot of friends from there.
Right. So, and I wanted to do surveillance and find out who was coming and going from this house, bringing stolen credit cards, and stuff like that. This house was terrible for surveillance. It was not a good place. There was no street parking. There was no parking lot. You couldn't park if you parked like a block away. Maybe you could see which car's pulling up to the house, but you'd never get the plates. It was a disaster. Across the street from that, from the house, the target's house, was an old man. I identified him. He had like a Marine Corps flag. He was like a what do you call it? A ham radio guy. Had to be 80 years old. He was an old Marine. And so I go to his house one day and knock on the door. I identify myself. He invites me in. I explain kind of broadly what I'm investigating, and I ask him if we can, if he wouldn't mind, while he's sitting there sipping his whiskey, watching daytime television, if he sees a car pull up across the street, could you create a log for me? The date, the time, the license plates of the vehicle, and the description of the person. If you got a camera, maybe you could take pictures of him. So I recruited that guy as an informant for me, getting me information about who was it that was visiting this house all hours of the day and night. And from there, I was able to kind of build it out on suspicious activity reports from banks about illegal credit card activity and build out this entire network from this credit card fraud ring that we were able to disrupt solely because there was one old man who I recruited as an informant who was willing to keep an eye on them for me.
So informants are crucial, it sounds like. I mean, these guys are
right, but and he never had to testify. Yeah. But he gave me the totality of the case because he was willing to do that. And you know what? I never had to pay him a penny. I've paid a lot of informants a lot of money, but this guy did it because he was a patriot.
Wow, what a good guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's long since dead, so I'm happy to talk about him.
Rest in peace. Yeah.
That
kind of brings me to another thing I was curious about too. How are informants typically compensated? Like, what does that look like?
It varies wildly. It's cash. You provide me information about a local drug dealer, or about a fraud scheme that's happening, or about a cop who's taking bribes. I just don't hand you money for that. I go and verify the information that you're providing, and then I request to my bosses as the agent. Nick provided it, or we would never use your name. My informant provided this information. All the information you provide, your name is stripped. You have like a code number and a code name.
Interesting.
And so it never comes back to you. And so I verify its authenticity, your story, and then the supervisor and I usually have a negotiating. I think this is worth $500. And they're like, $500? Nick's a bum. But give him $200 and a bottle of liquor.
Damn it!
Yeah,
Actually, deal. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we would never buy the liquor, but there's always a push from management to save the money, and the agents are usually more generous. No one's getting rich out of being an informant unless you're like making like super high level cases involving like Iran nuclear secrets or Russian troop movements and stuff like that. The average informant, if they're getting something, is a few $100 here and there.
It's really interesting that you negotiate with your higher ups for how much money
there's
getting.
There's no giant spreadsheet.
Yeah.
For like, weed dealer's worth $50, but a fentanyl dealer's worth $10,000. There's just it also depends on a lot of circumstances. Some people are motivated by money. Other people aren't. Other people would be totally offended if this former Marine, if I came to him and tried to give him a couple $100 for the information, he'd be like, "What are you talking about? I'm a patriot. I do this because I love this country.
I did that for America."
Some people do it for revenge, right? A lot of ex-wives and ex-girlfriends are great informants.
I bet they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember any, not necessarily a person, but any like specific informant that made the most money or the biggest single payout you gave to someone?
I probably shouldn't even get into that too much, but let me think. I've had informants who were so valuable and providing such valuable information that I was able to put them on a regular paycheck from me. Where every month they would get X dollar amount for the continuous flow of information that they were providing. It's very rare. It has to be funded by headquarters. It's a real pain in the ass administratively. But this particular informant, as opposed to kind of nickel and diming my boss to get him paid erratically, it made sense for the FBI and for him, with the intelligence he was gathering, to kind of put him on something more resembling a steady paycheck.
And would you say that amount was generally enough to make a living off of?
He had a person he lived with who was also making a living, and so this supplemented his income.
Okay.
But yeah, but being an FBI source was his full-time job, and I think those are the ones who actually probably get paid more, is if they're choosing to not work because they're being tasked by the FBI so much as a full-time job. Yeah.
Then it's like, wow, give that guy a check.
Yeah.
He's living for this. One of the things that you said earlier that really was interesting to me, it caught my attention, and also ties into stuff I want to talk about later, but might as well bring it up now. When we were talking about, there was an earlier case, I believe it was like when you were on the terror squad, you had made a very brief comment where you're like, you had caught yourself. You're like, I probably shouldn't say that because of how we like surveilled him or something along those lines, like how we found him. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I don't remember what it said.
I think it was, you were talking about someone like that you had suspected as a terrorist, and you had said something earlier along the lines, we're so far in a conversation, I can't even remember how long ago it was. But you had said something along the lines of like, you were about to say, and you're like, oh, like, I can't say much because of like how we found him.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So let me speak broadly because I don't want to talk about any one individual.
Of course.
Case.
Yeah.
FBI national security cases can arise from any number of things. They can arise, perhaps it's a wiretap on this guy where we learn about someone else and there's a spin-off investigation. Maybe there's an informant. Maybe there's someone who got in trouble criminally. Or maybe we're receiving information from an intelligence agency in the U.S. intelligence community, CIA, NSA, people like that, who don't want their fingerprints on a case that may one day be criminal. And so we're able to take that information from the intelligence services, thanks to the Patriot Act, which now allows them to talk to us, and then utilize that in to be the genesis of a FBI investigation that may end up being criminal. And so what you can't do, though, is talk about, if you're getting the information from a classified source, what that classified source told you.
Interesting. And for those who aren't aware, what is the Patriot Act?
The Patriot Act was a very controversial law that went into place after the 9/11 attacks in 2001. That kind of it did lots of things, some of which were very controversial, some of which should not have been controversial. The thing that impacted agents on a day-to-day basis that day is it tore down the wall between the national security side of the FBI and the criminal side of the FBI.
Interesting.
The old days, if I had a criminal investigation and that subject of that criminal investigation was intercepted on a national security wiretap, and maybe they're admitting to all sorts of stuff involving their crime, they couldn't tell me. because there was this wall between us, and and nothing from the national security side could come over to the criminal side. The Patriot Act tore that wall down and allowed us to actually win the war on terror as a result of cooperating between the intelligence community and the criminal agents.
Pre-Patriot Act, why was it that you couldn't share that information?
I think it was a misunderstanding. I think there was some lawyers at the very beginning in the early days of the FISA courts and things like that who made a determination that it would somehow be dirty pool for us to be using national security assets to kind of sweeten criminal investigations. I think the fear was that criminal investigators would begin using the national security stuff as an investigative tool. And that really wasn't what was happening. But eventually, bottom line is these intelligence services are just hoovering up information, right? There's a vacuum of intel, and sometimes they're going to come upon criminal intel that the criminal FBI agents investigating crimes like myself wanted to know about.
So are there cases, I mean, in theory, this is what I'm imagining, there's cases where you're investigating a criminal and maybe you realize this person is a national security threat and you pass them on up?
Absolutely.
How frequently would that happen?
Not too often. I mean, honestly, not too often. There's a couple cases that I had which was sort of veered in that direction. You know, if you're looking at a Russian mobster, you know, and maybe he's in touch with some people at the embassy and you want to make sure the national security guys know that.
And when I think national security threat, what comes to my mind is a terror attack.
Yeah, think of it as there's two different things that the FBI does in the national security space. One is, we talked about it extensively, preventing next terrorist attack, investigating terrorist attacks. But there's a whole other side of the national security side of the FBI, the counterintelligence side. And it's very simply, they're the ones who monitor and catch foreign spies operating inside the U.S.
Oh, that's an interesting
gig. So, like, you know, let's call it what it is. We're talking Russians, we're talking North Koreans, we're talking Chinese, the Cubans to an extent. You know, have intelligence officers here gathering intel in the U.S. And so the FBI's job is to identify who those people are. And if you catch them and throw them out, that's one thing. But the problem is they're just going to be backfilled by someone else. And so maybe it makes sense to monitor their activities. Find out, what are they doing? Who are they tasking? Are they developing informants inside our country in the U.S. military who are now selling secrets to this intelligence officer that we've identified? And so those type of cases are very important, and it's a thinking man's game.
When you identify a foreign intelligence officer, how do you handle that? I mean, you obviously can't go take that guy to jail.
Right. The way if the person's going to be expelled, it's called being PNG'd, where you're persona non grata in that country, where we basically, we're not arresting that person because quite often they have diplomatic immunity because they're a cultural attaché from the embassy or something like that. And so if they're causing so much trouble and we're unable to keep touch of them, we can PNG them, send them back home. And what happens is they just the country that we send it just sends one of our guys back and PNG.
It's just a fair trade.
Yeah. So again, oftentimes the smarter move would be to monitor their activities.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that. You know, it's probably smarter for you to hold on to those people and just keep watching, you know?
There's a good argument for that.
For sure. So kind of bringing it back to a little more of your career, you know, it sounds like after 9/11, shit got different for you for a long time.
Yeah.
But then eventually things settled and you went back to investigating financial crime.
What happened, though, is I got transferred to Honolulu, Hawaii.
That's a change of pace.
It sure was.
It's a nice vacation, though.
Yeah, it sure was. So,
how'd that happen?
Honolulu, people think it's like everyone. Have you ever been to Honolulu?
No, been to Hawaii? Never been to Hawaii.
It's a lovely place to
go.
It's
on my bucket list.
It's a great place to go on vacation. People go there and have the best vacation of their lives. Living there's a little different, right? Living there, you're not living in a resort. You're not eating at the buffet. You're living in a small house, and maybe the schools aren't so great. Maybe your spouse can't get a good professional job because there's not a great professional sector there outside of hospitality. So it's actually not a very sought after office for the FBI. So every now and then what they have to do is they send out a email to every FBI agent saying, hey, we're looking for volunteers. Anyone want to go to Hawaii? And so I saw that one day after another cold Chicago winter, and I was kind of reaching the conclusion on a lot of cases and trying to figure out what's next for me. Went home, talked to the family, and next thing you know, a few weeks later, we're kicking it in Hawaii for 7 years.
Wow, so you chose that. You're like, let's go to...
Raise my hands. and I've been done with winters ever since.
Wow.
I know you romanticize winters, but
how long did it take you to adjust to the heat there?
Honolulu's perfect. It's like here. It's like every day is like,
dude, I had to adjust even to this. I'm like a very heat sensitive guy. I'm like
I went like 5 years without wearing a shirt. It was fantastic.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no, I loved it.
You were built for it. You were chosen really by the Lord, I think.
I loved the summer. To me, anytime when I was in Chicago and there was an opportunity to go on, vacation or a cruise or something like that in the winter, or even go to Florida to go to Disney for something, I looked forward to it because it was going to be warm. I was never built for the cold. And when I look back on my life and how miserable I was in that cold Chicago weather, I just know I wasn't built for that. And so never again. But answer your question, I get to Honolulu, I get put on a financial crime squad right over, and I spent 7 years doing financial crimes, and the best time of my life.
How do the crimes in Honolulu differ from the crimes in Chicago?
They differed quite a bit for me because, again, remember in Chicago, I was on a bank fraud squad.
Yep.
So my victims were all bankers. And I'm going to break it to you gently. Citibank and Chase and Bank of America really didn't give a shit about whether they got ripped off or not. It wasn't a big deal to their bottom line. In Honolulu, I was on an investment fraud squad, right? My victims were little old ladies and families and small businesses that had been ripped off in frauds by bad con men. And those little old ladies were crying on my shoulder, looking me in the eyes and saying, we need your help. I need someone to give me justice. And so I just sort of had a real new sense of purpose because for the first time in my life, I had human victims that I can be a champion for.
Yeah, you had someone really there to thank you for your work.
Right, exactly.
That's got to be super fulfilling.
It was great.
After a whole career of just kind of thankless work to an extent.
Yeah, sometimes you could get their money back or seize the bad guy's car and auction it off and give the money to the victim, or at least get the victims the justice they know by putting this bad guy who ruined their lives away for years and years.
What were some of the Hawaiian cases that stood out to you?
Oh, let me think. I had a crazy case. The people of Hawaii, they're lovely people. They're really friendly, and kind of like intuitively friendly people, but they're not super sophisticated financially because the financial services sector just wasn't one of the industries that they cultivated.
Yeah.
Right? And so they would get con men from out of town. There was a guy who came into Honolulu and started doing investment seminars. His name was Patrick Rukutananahare.
Oh.
And he was from Madagascar originally, but settled down in Fort Myers, Florida. Flies to Hawaii, starts having these seminars at like the Sheraton on how you can make a ton of money in Forex trading.
Oh, boy, dude.
Right? You know what Forex trading is?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, it's the idea that you can trade foreign currencies, dollars to yens to
just
euros.
Keep swapping currencies and you'll get rich.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but what he said is he said, listen, I don't need you to be good at Forex. I'm great at Forex. What I'm going to have you guys do is invest money with me, and I'm going to give you 6% a week on the money that you invest.
A week?
A week.
Sounds great.
It was amazing, right? And because he had developed, his company was the Cyber Market Group, a computer algorithm to trade Forex. And you wouldn't even owe him money. Anything he makes above that 6% a week, he gets to keep.
Oh, wonderful.
It's fantastic. So he brings in about $1 million from about 100 different Hawaii families. And you know what happens? He starts paying them out. They're 6% a week. But what they didn't understand is that money was not being derived from Forex trading, but he was just taking their money and the money of other investors and funneling it right back to them in the amount of 6% a week, which is what we call a Ponzi scheme, right? It's when you pay people investment returns with their own money and with the money of other investors, while he's taking giant sums of money, putting it in his pocket, and spending it like a drunken sailor. Eventually, the Ponzi scheme collapses, because they all do, and my phone starts ringing from people saying, help, help, I've been robbed. So I get all the documents together, talk to the victims, hop on a plane from Honolulu to Fort Myers, Florida, knock on his door one morning, walk in there, and walk out an hour later with a signed confession from him. And he ended up going to prison and then getting sent back to Madagascar.
You make it sound kind of easy.
Well, I mean, it took about a year total. But yeah.
The way you worded it, just went and knocked on his door, got a confession.
Well, again, keep in mind, by this point, I had been an agent for damn near 15, 16 years.
So it was getting easier for
working
you.
a lot of cases that involved me conducting interrogations and getting people to confess to me and tell me the truth, even though it was against their legal self-interest. And so I got really good at that. Then I go to a CIA interrogation school. Then I start teaching other FBI agents and other FBI intelligence officers how to conduct interrogations. And so it became sort of a pet project of mine, and people started bringing me in on their cases to conduct the interrogation to get that confession. And so it's a real passion of mine.
I'm kind of intrigued, since you're an expert of interrogation, how do you tell when someone's lying?
Man, when I was a new agent back in '95, they had all sorts of things like if the guy looks up and to his left, it means he's looking at his brain for an answer and he's lying. All that stuff has been debunked, right? The best thing you could do is know the case inside and out and all the facts of the case before you sit down with the bad guy. So that's the first thing. But let's say you don't have that luxury. There's behavioral science tricks that you can look for. For instance, I would like to begin the conversation by just talking to you and finding out what you're like as a person, and then once I begin getting to the actual subject matter that I want to know about, I'm looking for changes in your behavior that might be indicative of a lie, right? Like, so the idea that you're crossing your arms, that means you're lying. Maybe you're just a guy who crosses his arms. But if I'm talking to you and you have a very open physical stance and you're speaking in the past tense about things that have happened and you're saying all the right things, then I start asking you about tough stuff, and then you stop making eye contact. Maybe you start looking down. Maybe your arms cross. Maybe you start telling stories about things that happened in the past, but using the present tense, which tells me that your brain is making up this story now as opposed to remembering something that happened then. Then those are the indicators that you're not telling the truth.
Interesting. Have you ever encountered someone who's just an incredibly good liar?
Oh, yeah. Many people.
Really?
In fact, most of the people. I had a Nigerian fraud guy in Chicago. He's ripping off banks with a fake ID and counterfeit checks. And I catch him. I'm literally sitting there showing him photos of himself, like ripping off the banks under false identities and saying, like, and he's looking at pictures of himself saying, "As God is my witness, that is not me." Right? There was no psychological trick I was going to do to break this guy. He had just decided, to use the Shaggy defense. It wasn't me.
Was not him.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that defense didn't work for him.
No, he ended up going to prison and got sent back to Nigeria, and then he came back a couple of years later, but that's another story for another episode.
Did he behave when he came back?
No, he got caught in another fraud. And
if you knew about him coming back,
I get a call from another agent like a decade later saying, "Do you remember Adedeji Okobanjo?" I go, "Yeah, I remember that guy." And they go, "He just came back. We arrested him in San Francisco for another fraud." I go, "Well, tell him I said hi."
It sounds like he's probably not here anymore, though.
Yeah. The answer to your question, though, is yes. Some people will lie to you with an absolute straight face, and so which is why it's important to gather the evidence and know the answers to the questions before you ask them.
Do you have any interrogations that you did that stuck out as like the most high stakes or like the most really important?
Okay, so I had a case 2019. Guy and his girlfriend from Topeka, Kansas, go on a Carnival cruise from Jacksonville, Florida to Freeport, Bahamas. First night of the cruise, she goes over the balcony in her cabin and falls to her death.
Oh.
Right. Before that happened, and so they have a morgue on the boats to put the dead bodies because a lot of old people die on boats anyway. Security interviewed him, the boyfriend who was in the room at the time. His story was that she was sitting on the railing of their balcony smoking weed, took a puff, leaned over, fell back to her death. None of that made a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. These balconies were not made. No one would sit on them in your right mind. It's just a really terrible place to sit. She had petechia in her eye, which is what happens when you get choked and blood vessels burst in your eye. Right. She also bounced off a lot of stuff on her way down. So the blunt force trauma, it could have explained that. It wasn't great evidence. The neighbors on either side had heard a knockdown, drag out, screaming fight before she went over the edge.
That's big.
No cameras. Very circumstantial case. By the time he made it back to Topeka, I went to go visit him a couple weeks later. I hopped on a plane, flew to Topeka, Kansas, sat down with him, and then after about an hour and a half of talking to him about the story, he confessed to me that he and she got into a fight that night. He grabbed her by her throat, choked her, threw her over the balcony to her death.
Wow.
And he's in prison right now for murder as a result of that.
I mean, good. Thank God.
Yeah.
When someone confesses in that scenario, does the confession help them in any way, or is it just really you getting the facts of the case?
Okay, so the federal system of criminal justice has a discount on your sentence for acceptance of responsibility. And it's up to the judge whether to give you that discount in your sentence. Oftentimes, the mere act of pleading guilty gives you that acceptance of responsibility. But the judge isn't required to give you credit for that. And so in theory, what the defense attorneys always say, when the defense attorneys wish their guy hadn't talked to me at all. Let's just establish
of course.
that, right? But they do, and I'm able to get confessions because I'm good at that. And So the defense attorney always at sentencing says, Judge, when Agent Simon went to visit my client, he didn't lie. He told the truth and confessed to throwing her off there. And then he pled guilty here. This man deserves his credit for acceptance of responsibility. He's clearly remorseful. He's sorry for what they do. So there's a benefit kind of baked into the system that you're giving the defense attorney a arrow in their quiver to argue that this guy is worthy of compassion from the judge. But that's the only real benefit.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think that, like, you confess to a crime, you're getting half off or something, like it's Black Friday.
Again, it's very clear that, and I trained this, that the agent cannot make you a deal at all, right? I'm not. My job is not to. I can't make you a plea deal.
Yeah, you do not have the authority.
But what I do tell them is, listen, if I want you to tell the truth about what happened. And, and if you were, I'm going to take the information that you tell me and I'm going to bring it to the prosecutor, to the judge, and to anybody who needs to hear it to know that you're not a bad person. You just did a bad thing. So let's talk about the reason why you did this crime. And so, but I can't say you're going to get 10% off. We have an issue?
No.
Okay.
I heard the duct tape rip a little bit, but I think it's fine, honestly. Yeah. I think we're just going to let it fall at this point, right? I mean,
it's going to fall, but yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, fuck it, dude. We'll see what happens.
Little snap, crackle, pop.
So one of the things when I was, getting ready for this episode, I've watched a lot of your past interviews, and you talked about during your time in Hawaii your involvement with the Ed Snowden case.
Oh, yeah. Mine was such a brief cameo, right? So by way of background, again, because not everyone here is going to know what happened, Edward Snowden was a contractor who worked for the NSA, the National Security Agency, which is, think of them as the ears in the sky, listening to international phone conversations and hacking and maybe reading emails of foreign citizens overseas. Edward Snowden realized during his time, and he lived in Hawaii, working as an NSA facility there, he believed that the government was overstepping its collection efforts. And he had some arguments to be made that had some real validity. But instead of kind of bringing that up the system by notifying his congressman and having hearings and all that, he decided to take that information to the media right away. And he did an interview with Glenn Greenwald on a Sunday that ended up airing, I think, on 60 Minutes and in writing in an article. And it was this huge bombshell, right, that the NSA is spying on U.S. citizens. And I have no real strong opinions either way about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I do not think Snowden handled it well. But that's my bias. But we were faced with this problem. I get called in to the office, and they're like, okay, there's this, and the first time we heard the name, there's this guy, Edward Snowden. He's going to be on the news tonight. He stole a bunch of stuff from the NSA, and now he's in, I think he started in Hong Kong. He ran away to Hong Kong, and now he's on TV. And so but we need to search his house, right? So he rented a house in a suburb of Honolulu. And we had no idea if it was just going to be like floor to ceiling national security secrets that we didn't want the landlord to get, who we don't know who that is. And so we get a search warrant for the guy's house. I did a search warrant of the house, where he and his girlfriend lived, in a very normal house, very normal looking 20-something guy. And there were no like, he'd taken everything that he needed to. He's not leaving behind thumb drives with national security stuff. He's sharing all that. So my involvement with the Snowden case was about a 8-hour search warrant that one time. Saying that I was involved with that case would be overstating it quite a bit. I was just unskilled labor needed for the search.
Yeah, I just specifically remember you mentioning being involved in the raid on his house.
Calling it a raid is even.
Yeah, the search.
He's in Hong Kong.
My wording was incorrect.
I'm always sensitive. Anytime someone's looking to criticize the FBI, and there's certainly enough to criticize, they talk about FBI raided this place or raided that place. The FBI is either conducting a court-authorized search warrant or a court-authorized arrest warrant. There's no legal process known as a raid, and so I always kind of like that gets my back up.
Yeah, that's just kind of like the movie wording for it.
It makes it seem more sexy and violent.
Rappelling down, kicking in the window.
I know you didn't mean it this way, but people use that word to make it seem like the FBI are jackbooted thugs. And I promise
I didn't know that.
Especially when it came to the search warrant conducted at Mar-a-Lago and stuff like that. The FBI raided the president's home. Really? Was it that? I promise you that there was no rappelling down the side of the building.
You didn't flashbang the president.
Right, exactly.
You just walked in the door.
Yeah.
So was there anything, I mean, you said he cleaned up pretty much everything. Was there anything that stood out that you found in that house at all?
Not really. I mean, his girlfriend was into pole dancing.
Oh.
But not like, she wasn't like a stripper. Just a lot of ladies do that as like a fitness thing.
It's a great trait for your girlfriend to have. Just like a pole dancing hobby.
I mean, listen, why
That's
not?
awesome,
Yeah. And I remember he had some books lying around the house that I read that book, or he seemed like a normal guy and he was a normal guy. I mean, he wasn't an extraordinary guy, he's a smart guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he had Adam Carolla.
Yes.
He had Adam Carolla's book sitting there on a bookshelf. And
Interesting.
I thought, oh, that's interesting. I like Adam Carolla, and so I just thought, like, oh, had I met Ed Snowden at a bar or at a tennis game or at a football game, we probably would have a nice conversation.
Share a couple
with
drinks
each other.
at the bar,
yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, you're with the NSA. I'm with the FBI. Do you know Johnny? Yeah, I know Johnny.
So, what really interested me about the Snowden stuff and your involvement with it is I kind of want to pick your brain a little bit about more your opinion on it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have I don't know, misconception is the right word, or just a lot of people believe after seeing the Ed Snowden leak stuff and seeing how the NSA is allegedly spying on citizens without, the right to be doing so, people think that the FBI does that too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's make. I think that's a great question. I do appreciate that question because I hate it when the FBI gets lumped into that.
Yes.
The NSA, whether you love them or you hate them, operates outside the boundaries of criminal law. Right. Everything the FBI does, and you may love the FBI, you may hate the FBI, though, is going to end up being subject to scrutiny in court. And so the intelligence community, by design, operates with a lot less scrutiny from the judicial branch.
Yeah.
Every time I conducted a surveillance or did anything, or a search or an interview, I am subject to the four corners of that U.S. Constitution, and I'm going to be held to account for that in court. And so the FBI really doesn't have the luxury to kind of over-collect the way that the NSA was accused of doing by Edward Snowden.
So I'm just going to kind of pitch to you how my uninformed brain perceives this. I just want you to correct me along the way.
I appreciate your opinion.
So what I imagine is, let's say there's someone that the government wants to investigate, right? There's like a terrorist, a suspected, someone like that maybe they don't have a legal reason or legal authority to search their phone or tap whatever they have. What I imagine is the NSA is going to go do that illegally, right? They're going to go, not follow the law, kind of as you described, go on their own terms, and get some information on a person. Now, what I picture is an issue arising when they try to use that information, right? Because, as you said earlier, it doesn't fall into the bounds of law, so it may have been acquired illegally. How do they pass that information down to you guys to do something about
well, let me
it?
start with your premise.
Okay.
The idea that the FBI is whispering to the NSA, we don't have enough to wiretap Mohammed. Can you wiretap him for us? Let me ask some questions. In this scenario, is Mohammed a U.S. citizen?
Yes.
Oh, really? Okay, so he's a U.S. citizen on U.S. soil.
Yes.
There's zero chance the NSA would do that.
Really?
Yeah, it's just not going to happen.
Why is that?
Because they don't spy on. Again, the NSA will spy on foreign nationals who are overseas. Quite often, if a U.S. person happens to be overseas talking to a foreign national overseas, the U.S. person will get intercepted. But there's zero chance that the NSA would ever wiretap an individual here in the U.S. It's against their charter. It's against what needs to happen at that point is that the FBI needs to gather enough evidence as to why they believe this person is an agent of a foreign power, take that to the FISA courts, the national security courts, and have a FISA judge authorize the wiretap of this individual. I've done that a bunch. But the idea that we're going to outsource that to the NSA just because we don't...
I didn't necessarily mean you guys approaching the NSA. I mean more so the NSA on their own determines, hey, let's...
Here's what I'll tell you. Even in Snowden had all sorts of awful things to say about the overcollection of the NSA. He never said that the NSA ever wiretapped a U.S. citizen.
See, that's, I think, a very common misconception. I think that's something even me going into this, I haven't read the Snowden documents. I'm not super versed on it. That was my belief.
Right. No, a lot of U.S. citizens are being intercepted when they're making international calls. Okay, again, when I'm wiretapping Governor Blagojevich, I don't know who Blagojevich is going to call, right? So some poor pizza guy who is, when he's ordering a pepperoni pizza, is in theory being intercepted by my wiretap. And the same thing happens all the time with NSA when they're listening to someone overseas. And the reason they're listening to them is because that overseas person may be a threat to the U.S. And so if they're talking to a U.S. citizen at that point, I guess they're collecting information. But it's very different. The question is really, who is the wiretap on? And so, again, I'm not all about the Snowden revelations, but I believe
Yep.
he believe what he's saying is that we had, that the U.S. government had backdoors to a lot of the big email providers like Yahoo,
Yeah.
and they're just like sucking up all the emails and putting them in these giant databases somewhere. That may be true, it may not be true, I don't know, but that's the overcollection that Snowden was talking about. Not
Yes.
that the NSA is spying on U.S. citizens in wiretaps on U.S. citizens. If he thought that was the case, I'm pretty sure he would have told us.
That's true. That is very true. Yeah, I am operating solely off of just like the vague social media readings
That's fine.
about Snowden.
No, I mean,
you know?
listen, I love being able to demystify these
There's
things.
a lot of papers I got to get through before I'm versed on that.
Right. No, and I think there's intelligent people on both sides of the argument about how
sure.
bad Snowden is. I mean, Snowden, I believe, from having watched the same documentaries and TV shows and movies that you have, I believe that he operated in good faith and believed that this was the right thing to do.
For sure. Yeah.
Whether you agree with him or not, it was a real brave thing that he did. I mean, insanely brave. He was probably making good money, living in Hawaii.
Yep.
Pole dancer girlfriend.
Yeah, he's feet up chilling.
Well, right. Now he's basically trapped like a rat in a one-room studio in Moscow.
Yeah, he's in exile for the rest of his life.
Yeah, unless someone pardons him.
I can't imagine that. Can you?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think the arguments, the pro-Snowden arguments, are crazy, right? I think there's a lot of people out there who make arguments that are absolutely crazy, but I see the point of the people who said that Snowden saw something and said something. I think he went about it all wrong, but I don't think he was cynical about what he did.
For sure.
And there's other people who are more national security hardliners, and any given day of the week, I may be that person who's like, no, you work for the USA, you support the USA, right or wrong, and there's an argument to be made for that too. So I don't think it's impossible. I would be surprised if Snowden dies an old man in exile. I think someone at some point is going to pardon him. Maybe Trump.
Yeah.
Trump likes to pardon people.
True, but it's a loyalty thing with him. I don't know if they've ever.
Yeah, I mean, think. Well, okay. Here's the argument for that. Snowden was doing his thing while Obama was president, right? The warrant for Snowden's arrest happened under President Obama. Trump may see this as a way to stick his thumb in the eye of President Obama, and say, listen, this happened under your watch. Had you been more careful, this wouldn't have happened. It's not Snowden's fault, or the Obama administration was the one spying on Americans, and so I could see. I don't think it would be in the top 10 most controversial pardons that Trump handed out.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get where you're coming from. I could see a play of Trump being like, well, I don't stand for Obama's decision in that, and just pardoning him.
Yeah. Or the guy's kind of paid his debt to society by having to live in Hong Kong and Moscow for the last
It's definitely
15
been
years.
long enough, I think. I mean,
I burned 0 calories hating Edward Snowden.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
everyone can have their own take on it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I get where he was coming from.
Not to cut again, but we're definitely losing the
We're
sign.
gonna take the sign down.
Yeah, yeah. Let's just take it down. Sorry about that, guys. Our sign was about to fall. We saved ourselves once again from impending doom, but we're back at it. Talking. I guess kind of wrapping up about the Snowden stuff, because I mean that's kind of where my knowledge on it ends. I didn't really read any of the documents.
I don't have any unique insight into his mindset or anything like that. And most, I just happened to have been in his little townhouse the day he went on TV. My involvement ended then, but it is an interesting case, right?
Yep.
Because here's a young guy who saw something that he believed to be tremendously unethical, did not believe that the system would be good enough to remedy that, and they decided to go public like a whistleblower. And so, I don't think that makes him the devil. I disagree with his approach because I'm like a system kind of guy and a law and order kind of guy, but I don't think he's the devil.
So what is the legal or correct way to go about raising that concern? What is the process?
Well, usually your agency would have an ombudsman you're supposed to be able to go to with kind of ethical issues, and the ombudsman can then escalate that. I think the NSA, I don't know if that would have been very well received, but we have elected officials. Anybody can go to Congress and go to your congressman or go to the head of the Intelligence Committee or the Judiciary Committee and get word to them that, hey, listen, I work for the NSA. I want to be a whistleblower and let you, as the representative of the people, know exactly what's going on here. And that's an option available to every federal employee.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I think it's a career-limiting move, but it's not.
For sure.
But if something really troubled you, that would be the correct avenue to kind of air your grievances.
And do you think he would actually make progress airing his grievances that way?
He seemed to think not.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it is definitely a valid belief. I mean, I think it is to an extent questionable when the government audits itself under the same roof. You know,
I get it.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough decision. I mean, the FBI, to its credit, has that brutal internal affairs division that investigates crooked FBI agents. I'm glad it's there. If I get myself sideways because I do something inappropriate, using my FBI car for personal use or something like that, I want to be investigated by FBI agents who know what it's like to be an FBI agent and not some third-party overseer.
That makes a lot of sense. But
the problem is then you need to make sure that internal affairs division has integrity and it just doesn't become a good old boys.
You can't have that prejudice and
right.
know.
And so the FBI, I think they often swing the other way and end up having a lot of public hangings of agents who mess up and do the wrong thing.
Really?
Well, again, it's not like he's a spy, but it's the use of the FBI car is a very typical infraction that an FBI agent will do, and they end up going on suspension for 6 weeks with no pay for misusing the FBI or taking their wife home, a passenger in an FBI car without because you're not allowed to have passengers who use it for personal use. That's not why the taxpayer gives me an FBI car.
Oh, that actually, I'm intrigued by FBI car. Like, I didn't even realize you got a car.
Yeah, it's like we're not police officers, but
we
function like that. I mean, at some point you can't take the bus to go do that investigation.
Is there any cool secret stuff built into that car?
Police lights, siren.
Okay.
But it's quiet. You look at the car, it looks like a Ford Escort or whatever.
It's a normal looking, maybe undercover cop car.
Exactly. And a kind of a very plain sedan or whatever, but it's got a police package on it with lights, sirens, and a kind of CB radio type thing.
They ever give you guys any really out there cars you wouldn't expect as
the seizure cars and the undercover cars are kind of out there.
Oh, so they would use cars they seized for this.
Yeah, so I mean, they're not in the same city, right? You don't want to seize like a pink Porsche in Chicago and then have it back on the streets. So
the drug dealer you seized it from sees you drive.
Most seized cars are auctioned off by the U.S. Marshal Service, but the agency can apply to have it used for undercover operations. So there's some pimped out Mercedes out there that was maybe taken in New York and now it's on the streets of Los Angeles in an undercover operation.
That's nuts. Yeah. So when I think of an undercover cop car, I'm thinking Crown Vic. I'm thinking Ford Explorer.
No, you're not talking undercover. You're talking you're talking unmarked.
Unmarked.
Unmarked is different than undercover. Undercover is what I'm driving to kind of give myself credibility as a high-rolling criminal. Unmarked means I just want to blend in with traffic. My last car was like a Hyundai Elantra or something like that.
So you've talked about some of this undercover work that you've done during your investigations. What is that like? Because, I can't even begin to fathom.
Yeah, the undercover program at the FBI, a lot of people misunderstand it. Very few agents ever go undercover. If you want to be an undercover agent, you need to apply or be appointed for a special undercover school. And it's a really, really hard school. It's 2 full weeks, and it's it's very much abusive. You're doing a lot of role playing. You're a lot of sleep deprivation, and they're really kind of evaluating you to bring you to your breaking point. And then if you pass that class, and a lot of people fail out, and there's nothing wrong with that because not everyone's built to be undercover. So I passed that class in 2003 around Thanksgiving week. And then I'm a certified undercover. Then what happens is then you get these emails every now and then saying, we need a white male in his 40s who can play the role of an accountant, or we need a Hispanic, we need an Arab-speaking agent, any age who knows, Sunni Muslim culture. And so you get these constant emails, and then every now and then you say, oh, I'd like to do this one. I'll take a week or 2 off to be this.
They're sending you almost just FBI job offers, like it's Indeed or something.
Yeah. It was funny that as an undercover, I would get the emails for we're looking for a black female. You can't collate that.
Wrong one.
Why am I getting this email? Yeah. And so it happened. But yeah. But again, I'm not like a credible crack dealer or anything like that. And so most of my undercover roles were in the financial crimes area, where I'm usually playing a very, very dumb rich guy who wants to invest money in a Ponzi scheme. I want to invest money in something that we think is a Ponzi scheme, and I'm recording the sales pitch from the bad guy.
Ooh, I like that. I like that.
I'm not cutting him a check at the end, but I want to lock in exactly the sales pitch that he's telling the victims of his Ponzi scheme, because all we're doing is hearing stories from them after the fact. And what's the defense attorney going to say? Right? The defense attorney is going to say he was never promising 6% a week. That's crazy. Who would believe that? This guy's made a bad investment, and now he's crying about it. But now he's lying about my client. But if I can get that investment pitch where he's telling me that, listen, you're going to get 6% a week in this Forex trading program, that locks it in. He's got nowhere to go.
When you're wearing a wire, or you're recording someone without their knowledge. Is it how people typically imagine, where it's like a wire actually taped to your chest under your shirt?
It used to be, yeah. We used to have these reel-to-reel tape recorders called Nagras, and you'd put them in the small of your back, and then you would take the wires and bring them up over your shoulders and have the wires here in stereo with the microphone on either end. But they sucked. I mean, first of all, it was before, this is like the magnetic tape age. That's how old I am. And but the Nagras would get hot and like burn the shit out of the small of your back. So the longer you were like talking with the bad guy, it's like having an oven against your back. Eventually, once we got digital, we were able to kind of have much smaller devices and devices that are more easily hidden.
Are you able to tell me like what those devices are like?
No.
Okay. Figure. How small?
I can't get it.
Okay, yeah, I figure. I'm so intrigued.
I don't want to be a dick, but thanks
I'm
for understanding.
No.
Yeah.
Listen, I've talked to people who can't tell me many things. You know, it's okay. I don't take any offense to it. Wow, I can't even imagine how crazy it is, though. Like, you've probably got like a little like pea-sized thing. You might have even wired this shit up right now.
Oh, I'm not an FBI agent, so if I were to wire you up now, I'm doing something really bad.
You're just a PI now, so you're still investigating stuff. Yeah, not for the feds. But taking it back to the undercover stuff, because I'm still very fascinated. Was there ever any times you like almost got caught wearing a wire or being undercover?
Yeah, there was one time I was undercover and I had to change my appearance pretty drastically for this undercover assignment, and I knew a bunch of people in my undercover capacity, but I was also doing undercover work in Chicago. And so I had a newborn daughter. Well, maybe she may have been like, no, she was like a year and a half. And I brought her to a park, and I'm like, when I'm off one day, and I'm putting her on the swings, and I see somebody there that I knew in my undercover capacity. And my undercover character did not have kids. Right, but I had a story that I was living with my sister, and she had some kids, and so every now and then I go take care of her kids for her, and so I'm like pushing my daughter on a swing, and I'm just hoping to God that she doesn't call me daddy.
Oh no!
And so eventually I said, "Well, I got to go. Good seeing you." I grab my daughter, pick her up, and like put her in the stroller and walk away as fast as possible. And that person who could have blown my cover, like, I saw that guy Tom, and he had a girl who was calling him daddy. That guy doesn't have a kid. It could have caused trouble for me undercover. I
mean, that must have been gut-wrenching, recognizing that person at the park.
You got to just roll with it, though. That's the deal, man. That's that again, undercover school trains you. In undercover school, every scenario you do goes terribly wrong. And so that way, if something goes wrong in real life, you're not going to freeze or panic. You're going to roll with it.
How do you get good at like internalizing those fears, those feelings?
Well, it's training, and you're also getting paid to do it. It's also voluntary. No one held a gun to my head and maybe be an undercover FBI agent. I raised my hand and volunteered for the assignment. And so when you take the job, you understand that there's some physical risk and some psychological risk, but the idea is you need to rely on your training. They're not taking agents who raise their hand to be undercovers and then making them go undercover the next day. They're sending you to a very expensive and detailed school so you'll be good at it.
Yeah, I can't imagine. It's just every stage of like school and training you described for this, it sounds like so much. For a guy who said that you don't like school, I mean, it sounds like you did plenty of it.
I think school's different than training, right?
For sure.
Like if you took a class on broadcasting and electronics and how to be a better podcaster, you'd probably be hanging on their every word, kind of trying to pick up tips
I probably
and tricks,
would be super into
right?
that. Yeah,
right. But I didn't really care about calculus. If you held a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you even why I would want to know calculus. But I had to sit through calculus classes to get my in high school and college. And so I think it all depends. Training to be doing something you really want to do is just a very different experience than getting educated in stuff that you don't really care about. And I admire good students who actually are willing to rise to the occasion and care about calculus for that semester. But I didn't have it in me.
Yeah, I thankfully never made it to calculus. Geometry took me out. Geometry took me down. Before I dropped out of high school, that was where I ended.
Yeah, well, look at you now.
Got my GED, though.
Well, that's
woohoo.
Good. It counts.
So another case that you had mentioned working on in one of the previous interviews that you'd done had a nickname to it. And the Stevie Wonder blunder
Yeah, that was
is something I wanted to ask you about, because I only heard the nickname. What even is that?
Okay, so the Stevie Wonder blunder was a case in Honolulu, Hawaii. Hawaii doesn't get a lot of concerts because it's from big stars, because it costs so much to get all the equipment there and the band there and all that. So when Hawaii gets a concert, it's usually a band that's like coming back from their Japanese tour or something like that. But one day we hear that Stevie Wonder is coming to concert in Honolulu, and everybody was so excited because he's a big star. And I love Stevie Wonder, and so I knew FBI agents on my squad who were getting tickets for the show. It was going to be at the University of Hawaii, and it was going to be a fundraiser for the athletic department, because the athletic department for the University of Hawaii has a problem because, again, travel is so expensive. So every away game for their football team like bankrupts the school.
$1 million.
Yeah, and it's a terrible team, right? So you even wonder if it's worth it. But it's the idea of Stevie Wonder coming to Hawaii, big deal. Tickets are going to go on sale. The problem is, and so when this comes out in the news, Stevie Wonder's manager, or his agent, or manager rather, gets a Google alert, right, for news about Stevie Wonder, and sees that Stevie Wonder is performing a concert in 6 weeks in Hawaii, and says, "Stevie, do you know anything about this show?" Stevie Wonder knows nothing about this show. Some fake concert promoters sold this show to the University of Hawaii and got hundreds of thousands of dollars from the university for Stevie Wonder, and they had zero relationship with Stevie Wonder.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so I got assigned the case, traveled around the world, caught the two guys. They both ended up pleading guilty and going to prison for it. But it was a huge local news story just because it involved a celebrity.
I mean, that's kind of a hilarious scam, though. Like, that's so terrible. I feel for all the people who spent money on that, but also, like, a fake Stevie Wonder concert.
What was
of
the
all
university
the
thinking? They never, ever took the time to
how did they not vet this?
Well, again, they're not really experienced in this. This isn't what they do. And also, they're dealing with the athletic department, right? They're dealing with the coach who needs to get uniforms and figure out how they're going to get the ladies volleyball team.
Yeah, the football coach has a 6-figure credit budget, and he doesn't want to talk to your manager.
So the athletic director, it's not his jam. He's not a concert promoter.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll go ahead a little bit. Now that we've kind of talked about, you and your history, I want to just pick your brain about general FBI stuff.
Yeah, please.
I'm really intrigued. So first and foremost, right before we filmed this episode, I just watched a Joe Rogan episode where Kash Patel.
I watched it today on the plane ride here.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sitting director of the FBI goes on Joe Rogan and starts addressing like conspiracy theories and is getting asked about JFK. And during the episode, Elon makes his now notorious tweet about Trump being on the Epstein list.
You see Director Patel treat that like it was kryptonite? He does not want to get in this.
Yes. What do you think, though, about someone who's a sitting FBI director going and doing interviews like that? Because that's a very new phenomenon.
Doing long-form interviews? I love the idea that any government official would go and do a long-form interview on a podcast.
Yeah.
Because I think this kind of long-term give and take is way better than the soundbite politics we have in most
100%.
journalism. And so I think it's a great thing. And I have my issues with Kash Patel, but I think it showed tremendous courage to sit there and have a long-form conversation where Rogan actually did challenge him on some points.
For sure, and I think he handled it pretty well.
Yeah,
too,
I thought he performed very well on that show.
I thought it was a great conversation. Yeah. It's interesting though. When, let's say, for example, during your time at the FBI before you had become a PI and everything, would you be allowed to go do a podcast and be like, I am an FBI agent?
This is what's interesting. Yes, and I have. But here's the deal, is that I was in addition to working cases, I had a side hustle at the FBI as a press spokesperson. The FBI at some point realized that I present myself well in the media, and so when they needed to shove somebody on TV or to a magazine show I was the FBI agent that was shoved out to speak on behalf of the FBI, and so I was very proud of doing that. And if you go on YouTube and type in Tom Simon FBI, you'll see all sorts of clips before my hair turned gray.
I found so many news clips of you.
Before my hair turned gray, back when I was young. And so when they needed somebody for an episode of American Greed or a TV show, I was often that guy. So I also did podcasts in the early days of podcasting where I would sit and talk to people and do long-form interviews like this, speaking on behalf of the FBI. Now I can be a little more loose.
Yep. Now you can just speak for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, too, about FBI tips because, I mean, you guys obviously solicit tips. You have a tip line and everything. Are all of them actually read, and how do you follow up on them?
I think everything's read, but the FBI we're in a nation right now with about 340 million people and about 12,000 FBI agents. So the FBI, by necessity, needs to pick their battles and go after the cases with the greatest societal impact that also have the highest likelihood of succeeding. So, which means that a lot of the small frauds get overlooked. A lot of the, the drug deals that aren't like kind of significant movements of large amounts of fentanyl, for example, into the U.S. aren't going to be investigated. But again, the FBI is also an intelligence agency, so they love having all those tips, which are kind of collated and uploaded. And the first thing I did when I got a new case is I searched to see, has anyone called in like maybe 6 months ago to give us a tip on this guy that went unaddressed.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people generally believe that the tip line is just like almost like an endless hole. You know, like they just drop the tip in and there it goes.
It's a bit of a hole, but it's a hole that's retrievable.
Yep.
But no, I mean, there's someone out there in the FBI universe who is reading every single complaint, and if it looks like the dollar amount of the loss is there, or that the national security threat is there, or there's a big enough case, we'll escalate it to the next level of management, and then it will trickle over to the city that this is about, and then perhaps. And I've had cases that landed on my desk that came from the FBI tip line for sure.
Now, one of the other things that I find really interesting that I don't think is really a rumor about the FBI, but more of like something that was done in the past. The FBI is said to keep a lot of info on people that aren't criminals. You know, for example, files on celebrities like Elvis or like Frank Sinatra. Is that something the FBI does?
Well, let's talk about that. So back in the J. Edgar Hoover era, he was out of control in the last portion of his life. So he was seeing communists behind every wall, very much kind of a McCarthy.
The Red Scare,
yeah, very much guy. So he would look at the Beatles who have hair down to their shoulders and think that those hippies who are against the Vietnam War must be commies and need to be investigated. So he was absolutely keeping files on people. Since then, though, we have the Attorney General guidelines that we operate under, and there are no FBI files on people. There's only FBI files on crimes. And so,
interesting.
So if you were interviewed in a case, because you were a witness in a bank robbery, or you were caught on a wiretap, and I just wanted to ask you, hey, do you know this guy? Our phone records show that you were on the phone with him the other week. What's his story? Then there would be a serial, a piece of paper in a file where you were interviewed by the FBI, but that's not a file on you. We don't. I mean,
you're just named in a file that's on a crime.
What a world we would live in if we had enough agents to kind of keep files on Americans. But it doesn't happen anymore. It absolutely happened in the FBI's past, and it's a shameful thing. It should never have happened.
Interesting. Another thing that I'm curious about, this is more of a rumor that I've heard than anything confirmed, but people generally say that cases that are investigated by the FBI or, FBI-related cases have a 99% conviction rate. Is that accurate?
If charged, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not every case that gets opened ends up resulting in a criminal conviction.
But cases that result in charges,
every case where the person's arrested or gets charged, yeah. Because the FBI is not, and again, it's not that the FBI are these hot shots. It's that the federal prosecutors are going to demand that you were able to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt before they're going to bring criminal charges, because those guys don't like to go to trial and lose cases. And so the idea that the FBI is going to run off half-cocked and arrest people. The FBI investigates and then arrests. The police quite often, because of necessity, arrest and then begin trying to build the case through an investigation. I think the FBI way of doing it is probably more humane, but we're also not drinking from the fire hose of crimes that a local police department is.
Now, the second to last thing, I just have two more things I want to ask you about before we head out of here. Second to last, this is one that someone actually asked on Twitter, and I have to know.
Sure.
Can you or any of the other agencies really see us through our webcams?
The FBI cannot.
Okay.
So I that's the only one I can speak for, right? And I'm not being coy. I know that FBI Director Comey was very famous for taking a piece of electric tape and putting it over his webcam and taking it off. And I think that's probably not a bad idea. But I've never seen an FBI warrant where we get a warrant to watch someone through their webcam, and we're only going to ever watch somebody with a warrant, whether it's a national security court warrant or a criminal warrant. There's no version of the world where we ever spy on a person or listen to their private conversations without a warrant. So get that out of your head. But
that is something that is possible to do.
I don't know, and I don't think. My guess is I don't know. But if so, it's so deep in the national security side of the thing that there's nothing that the FBI is doing to America. And I know this because I have broken into people's houses and installed cameras inside their houses and workplaces with a warrant. And so why the hell would I do that if I could just flip a switch and turn on their webcam?
I think we're going to have to do a second episode, honestly. You've got a lot more stories, it sounds like. We're going to have to figure out a second one in the near future. Last but not least, before we head out of here, last thing I wanted to ask you about. Recently, the FBI released the JFK files.
Yes.
And they were pretty much unreadable with how much was redacted.
Well, no, my understanding is that they released the unredacted versions.
No, not from what I saw.
Okay, all right.
Not from what I saw. Maybe I'm not super up to date, but I remember the day that happened, I was sitting there because I was going to do a live stream where I read through them with my viewers. Like, let's read this. And the link got posted by the official White House account on Twitter. Yeah. And it was, I don't remember the website, but it was a .gov, like real website. And when you actually go through these files, it's so redacted. It's like borderline.
I thought my understanding was that the redacted stuff is the old stuff and the new stuff was unredacted. But whatever.
That's I think what was promised, but that's not what really happened.
Yeah. I don't know, but I'll take your word for it. I mean, you saw what you saw. What's your
question? Do you
question?
think that like we'll ever actually see the true unredacted files on that?
Yes. Well, here's what I'll tell you. Nothing's being hidden from you. President Kennedy was shot by Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay, and every time a new version of the redacted or unredacted documents come out, they just confirm that it's a fun conspiracy theory because people like fun conspiracy theories.
100%.
But it's absolute horseshit. He was shot by Lee Harvey Oswald in kind of an amazing shot, and then Oswald was killed by Ruby, and so. You know, we could say all sorts of things about who Oswald was and whether there's somebody whether he was a stooge or whether people put him up to it, but he was the triggerman. And that's been proven again and again and again. And Oliver Stone doesn't believe that, but he's not the decider.
Wow. That's actually not the answer I expected. You heard it here first. Lee Harvey Oswald is the final answer, ladies and gentlemen. All you conspiracy theorists put it to bed.
Shouldn't be too controversial.
Yeah, no, definitely not. You'd be surprised.
No one's going to believe me anyway. I mean, this is not.
Oh yeah, all the comments going to be like, you can tell I saw him blink.
Yeah. He was. Tom was there when they faked the moon landing too. Yeah.
Well, for everyone watching at home right now that wants to support you or maybe needs a private investigator, where can they find you at? Yeah,
let me just address that because I've been talking like I'm an FBI agent the whole time. I'm retired. I retired from the FBI in 2021, and now I opened my own private investigative practice. My website is simoninvestigations.com, but I'm also Simon Investigations on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, where I do these 2-minute crime stories every day, like we talked about at the very beginning, to try to hype my agency up. Yep. But they're mostly they're not infomercials. They're just fun crime stories, usually told from a federal perspective, and they've taken off quite well. And if any of your followers wanted to follow me in that, I would really love that. Moreover, if anyone ever needs a private investigator, especially one with financial crime experience, I'd be honored if they called me. I will always make time for a free referral from one of your viewers, and I'll always make time for referrals that they want to, if they know somebody who needs one. I'm also available for public speaking gigs. If somebody is part of a group or an organization or a company or an association that has an annual conference and brings in a paid keynote speaker, they can give me a call on my with the link in my bio, and we could talk about budgets and kind of what I would talk about. I give pretty good speech on telling kind of FBI war stories and kind of talking about how you can harness FBI behavioral science to increase sales in your company and be a better manager as well.
Nice. I like that. And just for those who maybe aren't familiar with what hiring a PI looks like, what kind of stuff can you help people with?
My thing is mostly people who've been ripped off in frauds. They want my help in trying to recover the money and figure out what happened and perhaps funnel that case to my former colleagues at the FBI. Most private investigators aren't doing that sort of forensic accounting work that I do, but I'm a financial crimes guy, right? I'm expensive and I don't love surveillance enough to follow around your cheating girlfriend.
So it's only for wealthy men with cheating girlfriends.
well, every man has his price. I hate surveillance, but I like surveillance. So I was an FBI agent because you have like 10 people on one car. When you're a private investigator, it's just you. So you're just kind of following someone around.
It's just you, and you can't even arrest them.
Hoping they don't look in the rearview mirror and see you behind them for 50 turns.
That's going to be a problem if they do, for sure.
Trust me, it's a pain in the ass.
Well, everyone watching, all of Tom's links will be in the pinned comment as well as the description. So go follow Tom on Instagram. I do have to say his Instagram reels are very enjoyable. I love seeing the little crime reports.
Oh, thank you.
Very good stuff. Go tap in with all of Tom's social media and make sure you drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already, because we are very close to 250,000 subscribers on this channel, which is very exciting. Thank you all for the love and the support. And if you're listening on Spotify right now, keep doing so because they pay us more ad revenue than YouTube. So thanks, Spotify. Hope you all enjoyed this episode. I don't know about you, but me personally, I would love to have you back for a future episode. I think we should definitely talk about that.
I'd like it. I love this. I love
this. This has been an awesome conversation, and I really appreciate you coming on.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks
for coming by, man.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Everyone watching at home, thank you for tuning in. Have a good one. Gobcast episode 63. I hope that was the right one. Deuces.
I was an agent for 26 years, including several years undercover. I have broken into people's houses and installed cameras inside their houses and workplaces. I was getting ready to go out and interview somebody that morning, trying to get a confession on some bank fraud case, and then planes start flying into buildings. And from that day on, switched over and became a terrorism agent on that day. I'm flying around the world trying to stop the blood money from going to Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups. And my phone rings at my desk. I answer it, FBI, Special Agent Simon here. And it's this voice on the other end of the phone going, he's here, he's here. And so when they needed somebody for an episode of American Greed or a TV show, I was off on that guy. So help me understand, did you need that money to fund your drug habit, or did the drug...
All of it was for drugs.
Okay.
All of it, I was cash advancing myself to pull out of ATMs and buy coke.
Right.